Bangab Samnida, welcome to Avalanche Hacks Seoul. The room's going to fill up through the day. I know 36 hours ago, the team and I sat down. We're trying to figure out how we were going to salvage this event after getting flooded out at the floating island. But our friends from Invent and the production team who are here today, and this isn't the first time or the last time that I'll be thanking them. I think everything that you see around you today was pulled together in record time. So I just want to, before anything else, just stop and recognize the production team and say a very warm and heartfelt thank you to our friends at Formula E, who've really helped out a lot by allowing us to come in here and host you guys today. So if you join me in just giving a round of applause to that team, I appreciate it. Thanks. All right. Well, I'm not going to keep you too long. I think we want to dive straight into some of the talks that we have planned for today. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This is the main stage. Whoever's speaking up here will be broadcast to every other big screen that you see around the space. Please take some time to go into our chill zone and enjoy the gaming setup over there. There's a lot of fun things to do. It's also where you will find food and drink, which, let's be honest, is probably half the reason that most of you guys are here. I know it is for me. We've got the VIP area around there. Bathrooms are in the back. And later on, if you don't know where it is, you'll discover it. The track is a short walk away, and we'll get to enjoy some of that. So, with all that said, let's get things underway. I'm really proud to introduce you to our very own Olivia Wang, who is our representative here in Seoul, and we appreciate everything that she does for us. She's going to be moderating a really special panel that's talking all about creating developer engagement and what we can do more as a community to support developers. And who better to talk about that than a group of female devs? Because I think more than other cohorts in our community, you face your own unique challenges. So welcome. We're big supporters. Come on up and let's get things going.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Avalanche Hacks. I'm Olivia Song, and I'm Career BD lead in Seoul for Avalabs. So this is the first panel talk, and we have a lot of amazing panel talks and workshops throughout the day. So please stick around, and I hope you enjoy all the talks. So we have these three amazing women here, and maybe you want to know who they are. So I want to let them give a brief introduction of yourself.
Hello everyone. I'm Omji. Perhaps Korean know what my name is, Omjimin Tham. I am Korean living in Germany, working at Incode Cloud, which is Web3 education community. We are working with the L1, L2 protocols, onboarding developers, organizing boot camps, hackathons, and accelerator. I'm head of research and programs. What I'm doing is researching market and ecosystem to support early stage projects and developers, and also supervising them. I'm really happy to come home country and meet a lot of developers, and I'm happy to support you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Doris Hernandez. I am originally from Honduras, and I'm a developer and a founder, so I'm a supporter of HerDAO and governor of HerDAO Latam.
Hi, my name's Tracy Bowen. I am the founder of HerDAO. HerDAO is a women-focused developer DAO, and our mission is to increase inclusion and diversity in the Web3 space. We are quite new. We've been around since December 2021, but in that very short space, we've actually done a lot of great things, and we've been able to help hundreds of women get into Web3, get into hackathons. We give travel scholarships, and we're just about to create new regional DAOs, and we've just set up a regional DAO in Korea, and yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about that today.
All right, thanks for the introduction. So it seems that we have a developer, founder, and a developer supporting person. So yeah, so I think I want to start with maybe a more like a general question. So why is developer and developers so important in this ecosystem and industry?
Well,
It's a very basic question, yeah.
Developers are the lifeblood of any ecosystem. If you don't have developers, your chain probably isn't going to do very well. So engaging developers and supporting developers is an absolutely crucial thing to do within your ecosystem. And you know, it kind of feeds into the health of the ecosystem, because if you have a healthy developer ecosystem, then your community have something to get behind. If you have a healthy community, which is another fundamental of a really great project, then you're going to do really well. So, you know, that's why we try and tend to concentrate on developers. You know, from a Herd Eye perspective, we want to build the future that we want to see, and we want to take control of that. So as women, so that's why we do it. But in an ecosystem perspective, developers are absolutely crucial.
Yeah, like, you hello? Echoing what you said, I mean, at the end of the day, we are the people as developers implementing these technologies. So I think it's like the starting point for anything to go actually global and big.
Also, like while like blockchain is, you know, working on their visions, like someone need to build on top of it so that like in the end users can come on board it and they can use certain products. So like a blockchain and then end user app, there's like this huge gap, and that gap can be only filled by community and developers, that they can facilitate all those adoption by building something on top of the blockchain.
Great. And I think maybe because we are all from different backgrounds and different regions even, and I think you might have a personal experience on how to engage developers into the ecosystem. So I want to hear about your maybe personal experience on that. So Tracy, you want to go first?
I think for us in HerDAO, onboarding developers is different in every single region. We don't really have like a cookie cutter approach. We look at every region differently because there's cultural differences, there's, you know, differences in political systems, etc. So this will be reflected in the way that you onboard a developer. You know, say for example, in Korea, when launching in Korea, we didn't really want to just implant, you know, a different HerDAO group into Korea. We wanted to support the women in Korea to enter Web3 themselves. And what we can do is they can learn from our experience of growing a developer DAO. They can learn from our experience of raising funds. They can learn from our experience of community building. So like when we came, we had a welcome dinner with a few other developer groups, Women Who Code Seoul, the people from Chain, the private women's university, and all evening it was like a coalition of women's groups talking strategically about how to build developer engagement within Korea, you know, building women's progress within Korea. And that was super special. But what we really focused on was having a Korean lead. So we think it's really, really important that we don't just come in and implant ourselves into this situation. We think it's important to have a Korean lead and let, you know, Koreans, if we're in Korea, let Koreans, you know, lead their own projects.
Okay, so I'm Korean but based in Germany. So I have a special mixture here. And especially InCode Club is working with the international community. A lot of our programs are online, so you happen to see different communities. But of course, sometimes you can see that there's a lack of certain regional area due to language barrier. Korea is like one of that, even though a lot of young people speak English perhaps because of the time zone or like a language barrier. So they kind of need some warm intro, what kind of things ecosystem is providing. So that was one of my personal mission to come here, try to meet some students and universities and what they think they're missing there and try to connect the dots. So we don't need to make everything. There's already a lot of things existing, but someone needs to connect the dots that they can reach to the protocols, they can reach to the foundations, that they can get the grants, educations, a lot of materials. So that was the thing like I would like to facilitate in those Asian countries where I can connect the different local players who speak language, understanding culture, while they can connect to the international community.
Great. And I think Doris, you're a developer, right? So you might have a slight different perspective or similar perspective on what's the important factors that you think is to like engage into the community.
Yeah, sure. I think that hackathons are the way to get involved in new technologies. That's actually how I got involved in Avalanche Summit Barcelona. I actually did the hackathon. I mean, saw the technology and the power that it has, and that's what we implemented. You know, I've been an advocate of Avalanche ever since, but because I think that, you know, you're pioneering in the technology, but it's was through actually doing it, not reading about it, you know. And we were actually talking today, you know, people from Latin America are reaching out now to me like, hey, I know that you've deployed in this ecosystem. What would you recommend it to us? What are you guys doing? What are the perks? And that one-on-one connection is very important for developers as well. So that's the way for, I think, that developers can be on board is one of the ways. And documentation, I think, is extremely important as well. And for us, it's both ways.
Great. Yeah. I think it's really valuable to like actually hear from a developer perspective as well. Yeah. So I want to move on to another question. So you've shared a lot of insights that you experienced with your own community and organization. So what do you think is lacking and we can develop on onboarding developers into this ecosystem? Do you have any ideas? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a very lame but absolute answer is a documentation. So I know that like protocols are busy, like working on next steps, implementing new tech. Meanwhile, like we need a good documentation that developers all over the world who maybe even doesn't have the time to come to in-person events, or they don't even want to have a Zoom call or Zoom session because they're very knowledgeable and they need a small time just to understand the things, but then there's documentation missing. So we need to think about that, how we can keep journaling the journey, and then some tech writers can keep updating all the documentation up to date so those high-tech developers can follow up with all the information. And another thing is long-term education. So we need to do a long-term education in a sense that there's a university student. Recently, universities start to make some blockchain curriculums as a regular course during the semester. When we're gonna see the result? Maybe 2 years, maybe 4 years. And we need to plant that seed, even though this coming is a little bit late. Everything is very fast in this industry and people are waiting for the short-term result. But still, meanwhile, we need to plant the seed for the future that those young talents can keep coming into the industry, not to hurry, but with a full knowledge.
In my case, I think 2 points. Definitely documentation. Diversity is very important as well. Because like you connect better, like for example, with other women, you know, that's extremely important. Especially for female developers. It's very, you know, it's not that often that you meet them. So encouraging, you know, how can we bring them more into these spaces? I think that's one way to, you know, scalability. And then documentation. This is a problem that I've actually talked about in a lot of hackathons. How can you keep documentation updated? That's the issue is how can you update if you're deploying at that speed? That's a actually interesting hackathon problem to solve. Because, you know, like the documentation changing, how can you update right away? And definitely that's the case, something that the industry in general has to solve. It's agnostic to Avalanche. But I do think that you can get direct feedback again from hackathons. You know, we've helped change so many documentations in so many hackathons because you talk directly to the dev rails. Like, hey, this is not working. And they just update it right away. It's a low-hanging fruit, right? And then it's a win-win situation for the blockchains. They just get to know, you know, developers will get to know the blockchain and you get to, you know, improve your documentation. So it's more of like creating these spaces where people can feel comfortable, these one-on-one things where like I can meet other women, understand what are the problems that they're solving, and, you know, understanding how the ecosystem works for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, as Omji said, we probably don't intervene early enough. So like the earlier we can kind of get maybe school programs going, getting younger people into development, into ecosystems, that's like a really crucial thing, I think, and maybe putting more resources towards having more diverse teams. I think more diverse teams, you probably come up with better ideas, you're more innovative, you make better decisions, and ultimately you make more money, right? So I think putting resources into diversity and intervening earlier are probably two great strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I met Tracy in Amsterdam, right? And then I met Omji in Barcelona, and now that we are all here in Seoul having a talk together, it's really meaningful, I think. Yeah, so definitely diversity, and blockchain is global, right? So I think putting more resources on even more diversity and more global context and documentation, of course, is really important. Yeah, thanks for sharing your insights. Yeah, so we are talking about onboarding developers into the ecosystem. And I want to say that we are all female, right? And we are all women. So because in this industry, I think people say that maybe we don't have enough female developers or female members because sometimes when you go to these events, there are only guys, 90% is guys. So do you have any insights how to find or onboard more female members into this industry or ecosystem? Because you are the ones who are doing it, and I think you will have some kind of insight about that. Do you want to share?
I mean, for her now, I mean, as soon as we set up, we were like, a beacon for women in tech, because I think a lot of women think they're like alone or like, the only woman in the room. So when there's an organization that says they're about tech, they're about Web3, they're about inclusion, all of these women just start to pile into your group. And then you realize that these women were always there, but like they were, siloed or like isolated. And so now they see a place where they can kind of convene, where they can talk with other women like them, and then, they can start to build things. Because our thing is we facilitate builders. Building is our thing. That's our main important thing. We're not a talking shop. We don't do anything like that. We build. And, to connect with a great deal of builders all over the world has been, fantastic. So, to carry on that great work, as I said, we're expanding really, really fast. So we're scaling quite fast, but we're finding that, if we just help women form another HerdDAO in their own location, this is probably like the best way. So you're kind of like empowering people to do things for themselves, and then they engage other women, and then it becomes larger and larger and larger. And then you're going to have a global community of women builders, and that can only be a good thing, right?
For me, it's just share your story. I guess that's like something that you can immediately do with what you have. And share, like I did this, and start building community. I mean, I come from a third world country where, we had to build community to bring blockchain, just to make people aware of blockchain technology. And that was like probably my friends started seeing, and they just started asking, what is this about? And then I'm just like, hey, you know what, let's go for a coffee and let's talk about it. And that led to actually have a place where we can actually start talking, and we were 5 people. And then a year later, we're like 30 people actually going to these events. So it started small, but at the end of the day, sharing, it's very important, whether it's through your social, profiles and whatnot, and talking about it, right? I think that's the immediate thing that you can do. And like Tracy was mentioning, people are there, they just don't know where to go. And creating those small networks that will eventually create other networks, within the community will be very helpful in the long term. But it's more like sharing your experience. That's like immediate, solutions.
So HerdDAO is focused on like a lot of like diversity. So Inkut Club is not exclusively doing that, but what we are trying to do is like open the door for everyone and try to talk to everyone. And another thing is because me being as like female person in tech with a tech background, so whenever I got requested as a panel or judging at the hackathon, even though my schedule is super jammed, I try to take all the offers as much as possible just to be visible, that telling others that, hey, I'm here, I have a tech background, I'm working in blockchain, and just as much as all the others somewhere like working in their own spots, so that they know that, okay, she is there and I can be there, so that I would like to just show what kind of things we can do. Of course, everyone gonna have a different figure, they're gonna do different things, but one of the things I can do is like just showing that I am visible, I am here, and then another thing is try to open the door as much as possible. Our hackathons, our bootcamps, you're gonna see that a lot of female devs coming after they see that we have alumni, female founders, male founders, they collaborate, they auditing together, they do peer reviews. I think making the atmosphere that it's welcoming everybody is really important, and I am trying to achieving that also while visible in everywhere. So you may see me in every event.
I think Omji is really like literally in every event right now. Yeah. Yeah, so sharing stories is really important. I agree. Because when I was in Europe, when I met you, I realized that in Europe or in the States, there are a lot of female initiatives in this space. But I realized that because I'm in Korea, I'm based in Korea, and I realized that we don't really have much initiatives here. So I got that inspiration. And then last week, you were there, I hosted with a few female friends in the industry, the first Women in Web3 brunch. And then we were worried that, okay, will they show up? But like 20 of them showed up. And most of them were Korean builders in the space. And they were very happy that it happened. And then after the event, they came up to me and my friends and Omji as well, that they got inspired. So they will do same thing somewhere else, right? So I think sharing our story and just like do it everywhere we go is a great way. All right. Okay. Well, now that we are talking about sharing stories, I want to hear your stories a little bit. So you're the founder of HerDAO, and you're a developer, and you founded your own company as well, and you're the research and programming lead head of Anchor Club. And how did you get into this space? You know, that's a question that everyone asks to everyone, right, in the event. And then I want to hear your own story. How did you get into the crypto?
I mean, mine is a meandering story. So, like, initially I was a musician, actually, and I was touring the world and singing and doing all this stuff. But then I was really interested in cryptography and, like, tech. And around 2012, 2013, I dove into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. But then I was always interested in being on the other side. I was always interested in being a builder. Like, how do you create these projects, not just buy their tokens? And then, you know, I started to build decentralized data unions, actually. I did data research. And then it was when I was building those data unions that I wanted to build more diverse teams. And I found it really, really difficult to do that. And then I thought, listen, I'm going to stop building this stuff and just concentrate on building a diverse developer pipeline. And then, you know, HerDAO was born, and now we're sitting in Korea in Avalanche Hacks. So, you know, it's an interesting journey, but I wouldn't change it. It's great.
I am a product of HerDAO. Literally, I met Tracy in a hackathon. So that's why I'm an advocate of hackathons. And I was talking about my project, which is basically infrastructure bridging Web 2 to Web 3. So the idea is like, how can we bring more people into the space without making it hard, right? So it should be like a seamless experience. So I've developed more than 100 apps, built like the largest ride-sharing app of my country. And after that, I went to this hackathon. She heard about my story. She reached out. And now we're here. Like, we haven't stopped, you know, going to conference after that. So that's the story, and meeting people, like that's how, I saw like the potential the technology has. I started in blockchain actually in 2017. I worked for a year in a blockchain startup, and then stopped, did the ride-sharing app as I mentioned you, and then went back when I met Tracy. So I think the space has a lot of potential. There's a lot of infrastructure to be done. And I do see all the solution possibilities that can bring to every region. I think that's what like pushes me to continue building, and that's how I'm here.
So I am mechanical engineer with a control theory, 제어공학. So I used to work in embedded system that making a software demo or hardware demo for the electronic car. So I'm happy to go to Formula E event because I used to make the demo for Formula E. I was working at Formula E student team. Then I was working somewhere like designing the controller. But then I got interested in like blockchain, and then I was like studying about that, like especially also influenced or like inspired by my husband, who is cryptography researcher. So we were talking about blockchain over the dinner table, and then we used to go to hackathon for having fun. So we started taking the bounties, which were posted by different protocols. And then I was thinking like, if I'm doing this for fun, like why not having fun work, right? So even though I was really enjoying embedded world, I decided to fully jump in blockchain, try to shaping this industry together because I thought this was lifetime opportunity to contributing to the new tech wave. That's the one of the way like how I jumped in and why I am in Incode Club, focusing on education and training the developers for the early stage founders. Because I myself was going to the hackathon, building things. I want to have my own startup someday. And then before that journey, I wanted to support all the developers who are entering this new space.
Builders supporting builders.
Yes,
that's amazing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes, I think, right? So I think I want to open up the conversation without like any specific questions. So regarding this subject, like onboarding developers and expanding the community, do you have any insights or ideas that you want to share with the community, Avalanche community here?
I think for me, I want to talk about supporting the developers once they build the product. Because the reason why we support hackathons is because it's really just a supercharged way of building a startup, right? So in HerDAO, we're actually not just supporting developers, we're creating a lot of founders. So like 6-7 months later, we're like, wow, we have like probably 200 founders, I don't know, or 200 projects. And so, resources and investment is actually very lacking when it comes to women. We only get like 2% of all investment dollars, which is crazy, right? Like we're half of the population. So I want to kind of see how we can change that situation, or we can intervene and get more resources to women who are building and who build great projects. So, that's something that I want to do. And HerDAO is focusing on creating, good projects and founders, and we want them to become investors because we believe that probably the only way to change this structurally is to create successful female founders or women founders so they can become investors, so they can invest in other women, right? Amen. See, Devon's clapping. But yeah, so that's literally the only way we can see it changing. So my thing is, yes, developer engagement, but support them when, once they've built the project.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, again, exactly in that moment, I think there are multiple stages in your journey. Onboarding, what we were talking, like sharing your journey. Then when you've built, that's the hardest part, to be honest. When you're building, because like you're gonna have issues, right? Like hiring, how can I have a diverse team as a woman? Then you have the issue of like, where do I find them? So I come back to these conferences, right? So my takeaway in this is like, there will be like different stages in the journey of any female founder, like any female developer to founder to VC or investor, or you can be both. So finding those moments and knowing, how can we support that woman in a specific moment, it's going to be like, very important for the industry.
So as we covered a lot about like how we can involve like more female devs and founders and investors, I'd like to mention a little bit more like general things. It's like we kind of continue this like supporting of the developers, but not only Web3 developers, but we need to also onboard a lot of Web2 developers. Especially Web2 developers, or in general developers, are super scarce resource all over the world. So that we need to give them a right vision why they should be involved in this industry and why we have a limited downside. It's not like you need to all in and you need to forget about all your skill sets before, but it's still transferable skill sets you're going to be building on. So that's what we are trying to do, like focusing on also like onboarding different demographic and different backgrounds developers all over the world, trying to introducing different opportunity in this industry. As I mentioned, this is a new tech wave coming, and I think it's lifetime opportunity because this kind of thing happen every 20, 30 years. So last time when dot-com bubble came and everyone is jumping into the new tech wave, I think I wasn't born yet, or maybe I was, I don't know, baby who couldn't talk. Now I'm glad that actually I can contribute to this industry and I can be a beacon to many other also female devs as well. So that's something we can do, try to talk to everybody, and then onboarding devs, either they're Web3 or they're Web2 devs who doesn't see the value here yet, and then we can communicate and keep training them.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for
No, I said cool. No, that's fine.
Yeah. I want to keep talking because this is really inspiring and interesting, insightful. But I think our time is almost up. So I want to say thank you to our amazing panelists. And then they're going to be staying around, right? Stick around. So please meet them when you want to talk to them. And we have next amazing speaker who's, okay, yeah. So, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank you.
enjoy the hack. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, ladies. It's always a pleasure to have you. Olivia, if you could stay for a second. When I got started, I made two bad mistakes. One, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Devin Ferreira. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here. If you have any complaints or questions, just flag me down. But also, I screwed up Olivia's name. I introduced you as Olivia Wang. I'm so sorry about it. I don't know why I did that. Olivia Song, everybody. Thank you very much. The other thing I forgot to mention is that all of these talks are being translated in real time into Korean. So if you're a native Korean speaker and you're having a hard time following along, please go back to the ABB board over there where it says Drivers of Progress and you can pick up a headset. Olivia, if you wouldn't mind sharing that same information with our Korean audience in the next language.
저희 지금 이제 모든 톡들이 영어로 진행이 되는데요. 이게 트랜슬레이션 번역이 제공이 되거든요. 그래서 통역이 필요하신 분들은 저기 뒤쪽에서 기계를 사용하시면은 이 모든 톡들을 다 이제 통역된 버전으로 한국어로 들으실 수 있습니다.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's keep things rolling. We move it along. We just got done talking about developer engagement, and how do you know if you're engaging with your devs if you're not measuring anything? So at Avalanche, we're very science-driven. We measure everything, and we try to inform all our decisions with data where it helps. And our friends at Catalyze actually have been very helpful in helping us make sense out of all that social data. And so I'd like to invite up Ben Coe from Catalyze to talk to us a little bit about actually measuring some of these things. So please come on up. Give him a warm welcome.
Hi everyone, this is Ben Coe from Avalanche Research. 안녕하세요. 저는 한국의 고병호라고 합니다. For today, I'm going to be talking about analyzing Web3 community through social listening. So many of you guys, of course, know about Web3 community. It's a community that runs the projects. But have you guys heard about social listening before? I'm pretty sure it's a term that you haven't heard before. So today, I'm going to be talking about how Web3 community can be combined with social listening to come up with many different kinds of useful insights. So before we go into the details, first I'd like to give you an introduction of myself and the company. So we go back to 2017. We were founded in Shanghai, China, when at that time Crypto Hub was formed. And we started as a venture capital. So before it was called the Catalyzed Ventures. And what we did was we invested in projects in the early stages and helped them grow as an acceleration. Within the growth, there are a lot of different kinds of activities, like helping them organize events to connect with an offline audience and helping them with online activities to raise their awareness. And what we found out was that the good tech, good team, and good token metrics or tokenomics is important, but out of every factors of success, community is the most important part. So then we focused on the community building for the rest of our business. And it was very difficult for us to find out what exactly made the community important part of the project. We know in our heart that community is the most important part for the project. But why is it important? And that's why we wanted to dig deep and wanted to take a look at the data, because looking at the data proves the result that we see outside. So then we focused on the data, but not just any data, but social data. So later on in the presentation, I'll be explaining more about the social listening and what kind of data we analyze and how we collect these data. So community, what exactly is a community? And what is it so different that people emphasize it? So in the traditional companies, they also have a community, but nothing like Web3 community. So the three main factors of community is users, developers, and investors. But it's not just limited to that. Of course, there's more, like the government and other parts. But traditional companies, the relationship between the users and developers and investors are very different from the Web3 community. In the traditional companies, the communication between the user and the company is very limited. And developers, they're just the employees, and their voice cannot be raised in most of the situations. And investors, if we're talking about early stage projects, investors don't have much of a voice, much of a governance over the company. But when traditional companies gets listed on big exchanges like NASDAQ or S&P 500, that's where the investors have the ability to vote for for their ideas. But what's so different with Web3 community? In Web3, we consider the community as a team because we approach as a decentralized organization rather than a centralized arm. So yesterday's user can become today's colleague, a teammate, and yesterday's developer can become a core developer of a project. And investors, they also become a team to support us in a long term because they're both a user using the tokens and investor having a stake at the company. So we all know that Web3 community is very important, but how do we quantify it to see the actual data that proves Web3 community is important? That's where the social listening comes in. Many of you probably heard about social listening or social hearing or many other terms, but this is basically collecting data from many different social media channels such as Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or even closed communities like Telegram or WhatsApp and all these communities. So social listening is a process of monitoring online conversations and collecting the data from social platforms like the ones I just mentioned and on a chosen topic. So we'll be discussing about crypto or blockchain or Web3 in specific. So what we do with the data that we first collect within the social media is that we first cleanse it through getting rid of all the garbage data, which is, most of you probably know, any data scientists here would agree that the most difficult part about dealing with data is cleansing it. So we put most of our effort in cleansing the data, getting rid of the garbage, and then after that, that's where the data analyst comes in. And within the data, we find some kind of patterns or some kind of insights. And then that insight becomes something like this. So this is the first, I'll be talking about 3 different kinds of applications. And this is how social listening is combined with Web3 community. So this is actually not the price, it's the volume of social mentions. So if I mention crypto or Web3 or any related words on the internet, then that would count as 1. And we can also discuss about reach, but that's another story. So I'll be mentioning about the social mentions today. So the funny part here is that, or important part, is from 2021 November, the market went into the bearish trend. But when we see the social volume, it's still increasing, which means social interest is still very vibrant, and we are not in the bear market yet. Because I know many of you here started getting into crypto even before 2017 and have experiences over experiencing the crypto winter, a long-lasting winter that nobody wants. So in 2018, when the crypto market was in the downtrend, the social volume also went to the downtrend as well. But here, since the trend is upward, we can find that we're not actually in the bearish trend. And with the increasing trend, we'll see some kind of spikes on top. And these are called the peaks, and we call it the peak driver. And within the social volume, there are some events or issues that gain more interest than others. And here, I brought 3 examples. So first, when Elon Musk started mentioning about Bitcoin or the crypto or Dogecoin or any other blockchain-related topics, of course the social volume went up. But in this specific case, it's when Tesla suspended the purchase of vehicle through Bitcoin. And the peak compared to other peak is really large, which means a lot of people are focusing or discussing about this topic. And also, recently, there has been a crash in Luna, unfortunately, because of the algorithmic structure. We see that we thought the issue was too big, but compared to the one on the left, which is Tesla, it's comparatively a bit smaller than that. And what we found out was the 2016 hack happened in Bitfinex, and I was never aware of it, and it was just not big enough for me to understand or remember it. But we found out in a peak, the recent, there has been a seize for 3.6 billion Bitcoin from a couple hackers. These are like a couple hackers who hacked back in 2016, and they got caught recently. And here we can see the different kind of level of social volume. And here next, I'll go to talk about the next crypto hub. So many of you here are owning a company or getting ready to start a company. And navigating the location, the right location, is very important. So back to 2017, when Bitcoin mining was huge in China, the crypto hub was created in China, Shanghai, and that's where I was at that time. And later on, 2018, the social interest moved to Korea because many traders got into crypto, and Korea had a huge hype in the crypto market. In 2019 to 2020, because Singapore came up with a regulation regarding the token issuance or virtual asset provider license, many crypto projects went to Singapore to settle. And then 2021, the most volume came from the United States, and most of the volume were consisted of NFTs. And that's where many projects decided to move to United States. So where would be the next crypto hub where people, many projects are in one place and communicate and build projects? So through our social volume, social data, we figured out the next social hub, crypto hub would be Dubai. So right now, because the license was issued and it started on April, not many projects moved to Dubai. Most of the projects are just exchanges moved to Dubai. But in the near future, within a year, based on the social data, there's going to be many projects moving to Dubai, and the crypto hub is going to be formed for at least half to a year. So many of you would be curious about what the next trend is. This is a BCG metrics where a lot of business and crypto or business and strategy consultants use. Coming from a consultancy background, I love using this chart. And if we look at the leader part, this is where the current trend is at. NFT, metaverse, and all kinds of Web3 projects, and X to earn, which means the walk to earn or move to earn, play to earn. And recently, I've seen something like sleep to earn. I don't know how that project's going to go, but these kind of projects are trending right now based on the social data. And if we see the X-Champs, our DeFi and gaming part is kind of fading in the data. And later on, 6 months or 1 year later, all the leaders pretty much are going to the X-Champ part because according to social growth, gaming and DeFi are lacking in that part. So the real question here is, what is the next crypto trend? So we can take a look at the challenger part where they have small size of social share in the market, but have a high number of social growth. So many of you probably know about public blockchain, but maybe not familiar with the word like layer 1, layer 2. But here we can see that layer 1, DAO, Relayer are the most projects with or sectors with the most growth. So layer 1, of course, Avalanche is a layer 1, and many people who is in the tech or the business are getting to know more about layer 1. And DAO has been around since a long time ago, like 2016, but now there are guilds in gaming, and there's also DAO ventures and investment. People are trying to decentralize applications, and it's actually working as we speak. And Relayer is a new kind of concept, but it focuses on increasing the user experience for mass adoption. So we can see that the trend is moving towards a mass adoption, and the next mega trend would come from somewhere from challenger area. So these are kind of application, or these are kind of insights that we come up with through analyzing social data. And after looking into the mega trend or the macro trend, we'll take a look at specific cases for Avalanche. So Avalanche is a layer 1 project, a public blockchain, wants to achieve many things. And I want to focus, let you know that this part is just on focusing on the community part, not the tech or any other business development. So what is important part for the community? So I think diversity is important. In this event, I see many people coming from different countries, and we're all fans of Avalanche. And being diverse means there's more creativity. And for Avalanche, the coverage of regional area is very diverse, and you can see the deep red is from the United States, Australia, Japan, Korea. Many countries are interested in Avalanche. And if I calculate or analyze the community penetration rate for the other projects, it's at about 67%, which means with an average project, they're not localized in some of the areas. But for Avalanche, other than the gray area, Avalanche is active in those red areas. And here, so analyzing or assessing a project, seeing how they're doing right now and predicting the future, we have to see two factors. First is the unique number of interest. So here we can say unique number of mentions and reach, and also the growth rate of the project. And what we focused here is the growth rate, because we want to see which project or how Avalanche will do in the future. So the data we collected was from the beginning of, or July 21st to July 2022 here, as we speak. And in a year of time, Avalanche had more than 700% of growth rate in social volume, which means a lot more people are talking about Avalanche and Avalanche-related topics. So what kind of data was consistent in the 700% increase or growth rate? So that's why we analyzed the details, or we labeled the details of what made Avalanche so successful in the last year. And so the topic covered was DeFi, NFT, fundraising, which is the Avalanche, metaverse, and gaming. So many projects also want some kind of ecosystem map like this, and most of the projects are focusing just on one thing. But for Avalanche, because it's so diverse and it's so distributed, the ecosystem is consisted of many different topics, and each topics are consisted of either tech or dApps, or even just a topic about the trends. So when we see Avalanche, parts at the gray area is where we should look at and focus more on, and parts in the red area is where we're strong at. So now we want to hear about the voices of the community, what people are actually talking about Avalanche. So within the voices of community, there are a few topics that people talk the most about, and people rate Avalanche. And these are the words that came out from the internet, as in like from Twitter, YouTube, and all the blogs and news media like Bloomberg or any other kinds like CoinDesk. And we found out that 41% of the topic was about fast transaction, and the second is safe and secure, and the third is eco-friendly, and the rest is user-friendly, decentralized, and low gas fee. So this kind of sums up what people think about Avalanche. So if we look into the actual text that we analyze, we collected data something like this. You'll notice for fast transaction speed, what a user actually said was, you'll notice how fast a transaction is on Corbata. Very excited for projects launching on AVIX soon. So these kind of expression leaves footprints on the internet, and that's where we collect them and analyze. And it's funny how, it's interesting how we are at an event where a Formula E is organized, and Avalanche is in partnerships with Formula E Andretti team. And at the beginning, when I first heard about the partnership, I was curious how Avalanche decided to do this kind of a partnership. And so I dug deep, and looked into what was the reason behind it. And the first, second, and third topics that users discuss about Avalanche is fast, eco-friendly, and safe and secure. And the funny thing is, you guys may know or may not know, but Formula One and Formula E are different in that Formula E is more eco-friendly. And I think that's where the connection came from. So by analyzing these data, we can find out what was behind the choices that projects make. And by having a concept of eco-friendly and sustainable and fast, we can kind of match it with the Andretti Formula E. And that's where people picture Avalanche when they hear about Avalanche, or even for Andretti. So through social data, we can analyze these kind of things like macro, or like audience, and even competitors. What we want to do is, there are many partnerships or business development or any kind of things that are on the media where we first hear about it. But what is actually happening in the back? Like, what is actually the reason behind all these choices? So we dig deep and look into the social footprints of the internet, social media, and we want to give insights like this. And hope you had a good time. And if you have any questions about the social listening or social analysis or anything related to what I just presented, I'll be around, and thank you for listening.
Right, thank you, Ben. Data can be very interesting, and you're right. Speed, science, sustainability. It's really cool to see data telling that same story. All right, so thanks for your time, and thanks for your help. Catalyze, Ben Coe, thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so it was interesting looking at that data. I think the number 2 was about safe and secure. Obviously, in crypto and in blockchain writ large, one of the big challenges is, there's some shady activity sometimes. People unknowingly are making mistakes and, losing what they have. So security and being comfortable that the dApp you're working with is one you can trust is important in our space. And so I'm very happy to welcome our next speaker up to talk specifically about that. How do we make sure that projects are safe? So please join me in extending a warm Avalanche welcome to Connie from CERTIC.
So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. And today we're going to share some of the learning and experience that in the terms of security. So the topic that we're going to talk for today is how to secure the Web 3.0 Web3 world. So we're going to share some of the insight, hacks, cross-chain exploit, and some of the security best practices that able to helping the developer to building a more safety applications. Yeah, so CERTIC, we are a blockchain security company. So we have a mission critical in making a Web 3.0 even more secure than Web 2.0. And formal verification is our DNA, meaning that we are founded by 2 of the experts in the field, They are both professors from Columbia University and Yale University. And so far, we have been secured more than 3,000 projects and giving more than $360 billion in assets. And we are also, we're backed up by investors from the top tier line, for instance, like Insight Partner, Goldman Sachs, Sequoia, Tiger Global, and etc. And my name is Connie Lam. I'm usually from the engineering team that were responsible with most of the auditing business line and the incident response. So by overseeing the incident response, it really gave me like the very first-hand exposure about some of the incidents or maybe like cross-stream breaches that are happening on the current market. And for supporting the Avalanche, Certicate has always doing like a long-term support on the Avalanche network. So far, we have done like more than 250 projects audited and successfully helping them to launching on the network itself. But this is also some of the highlighted features and projects that we have listed here. So this year, the blockchain hacks has been happening a lot, right? Until August 12th, there is already more than $1.73 billion of exploit. And the next slide, we're going to summarize some of the notable blockchain incidents that are happening from the beginning of the year until now. You can see like over month by month, you were seeing a lot of numbers were showing up here. And the categories was mostly were related to cross bridge and some of the DeFi application exploit and maybe like governor attack. So, and next slide, this is the summary that what we make about the previous two slides. You can see like the cross bridge incident has been making like more than $1.3 billion accidents, and most of the time they were caused by the private key leak, maybe vulnerability on the verification design, malicious transaction or signature, etc. Governor attack, which is also one of the rising star, which has been making like $200 million loss. And then the last one would be like some of the smart contract vulnerability that were kind of in a trivial mistake that were, for instance, a lack of the validations, re-entrancy attack, price oracle manipulations, foul logic error, and also the lack of access control. But today, since like the cross-bridge incident has been making the major number, so we're going to focusing discussion, can we do better on that part, and how can we prevent some of the similar mistakes that were happening in the past. Yes, so this is a few of the topics that we're going to go over. What is a cross-stream bridge? What are the common security issues? What are the lessons learned? And then what to do if really there is a case happening, right? So what's a cross-stream bridge? In short, cross-stream bridge is helping individual to moving and transfer their digital assets from one blockchain to the other one. And below, this is a typical 4-step that a user will be experienced on when they were interacting with the cross-stream bridges, right? The first one is user making a deposit on the cross-stream from the original chain A, for instance. They will make the qualification how much amount they want to transfer and which network they would like to receive the money on. And then lastly, there will be like a verification proof to make sure that the transaction is intended to happen on the chain A. And finally, and if everything goes well, then the user is able to restore the assets from the chain B, which is the destination chain. So in here, according to the past couple incidents that happened in the cross bridge, we identified that there is a few of the common attack vector that could be usually happen. From the diagram on the right-hand side, we can see that usually a attacker will inject with a malicious data on what we call a spoof data, and then it will go into a defective verification process bypassing the verification on the original chain. And then it will generate a proof of a non-existing asset and then pass it to the bridge. The bridge will communicate to the destination chain, and the chain, which is the chain B. In chain B here, they see everything is going well, so they allow the hacker to receive the money that they were specifying. So in here, I would just take into one of the example, go into a little bit detail what are the true scenario happening. So from the left-hand side, the figure is a destination chain. So the user actually is trying to make a deposit in Ethereum blockchain, and where they want to receiving the fund from the destination chain, which is a BNB chain here. So now let's get a little bit deeper, closer check about what's happening within the deposit functions on the Ethereum blockchain. So in here you can see this is actually the smart contract from the qubit bridge functions deposit. You will see that the deposit function are passing the 3 parameters. One is the destination domain ID, the resource ID, and call data. We're going to go over step by step to see what's happening in the code and how the hacker able to transfer the $80 million out from this whole entire transactions here. So in the first step, they are doing a really good check is to validate if a user have enough fee to pay for the transactions. And then later on, they will using the passing resource ID to matching the responsible handler contract. And they do have a check for make sure that the handler contract is a validated contract. And then they will increasing the deposit nonce with a given destination domain ID, which is really good. If every check pass it, right, and then they will go to calling the handler contract with the deposit function and passing along with the resource ID, the message sender, which is the one that we're calling the function itself, and with a given input data here. And at the end, you will see that the engineer doing a good job. They emitting a deposit function just for better logging and chasing perspective. Now, let's getting into a little bit deeper close into the line 208. What's happening inside the handler deposit functions? So this is the function that from the handler contract that we're just seeing from the line 208. The deposit function is still very similar. It's passing 3 parameters. One is the resource ID, the depositor address, and also the passing along call data. So at the beginning, they were trying to decoding the data to extracting the options and the amount that they would love to transfer or maybe making the deposit on. And then lastly, and the next one, the 927, they were utilizing the passing along resource ID to find a matching token address contract. And then in here, 928, they do check if the passing resource ID and return the token address is a whitelisted contract address, which is a legitimate contract in their products, right? And from line 130 to 135, it looks like they have a special logic to handling if the token address is a burn address or not. So in here, we will skip the burn part because we verify this is not like nothing to do with the burn logic. So we will directly jump to the line 134. In line 134, there is a check about saying like the deposit amount has to exceeding the minimum requirement for the bridge to make the deposit on. And then the last one, 135, if everything looks good, then the token contract will make the safe transfer from this contract address into the depositor address and with the given amount, right? You will see like the function, the engineer is doing a really good job. We're doing a lot of check, but how come it's still bypassing all the validations here? And after decoding with the call data, we realized there are a few things we're doing wrong and making worse the loophole that the attacker able to play around with the game is, first, it's a resource ID that they're passing actually return a 0 address for token address, meaning that actually there is no found token address were whitelisted here. But in line 128, whenever they were checking if the contract whitelisted address is a legitimate contract, For some reason, the contract whitelisted mapping, they were putting address 0 as like a legitimate contract. So they passed the check line in 128. The first check go in. And then inside the core data, we find out that the attacker actually wants to make a deposit of 190 ETH, which is exceeding the minimum amount. So line 134 got checked. And now it comes to here is, if the token address is everything looks good, then execute. And this is where another problem here is. Token address in the Ethereum, or maybe Lost Solidity, is an EOA account. So from the low-level call, the safe transfer from will always return success. Meaning that even though the contract address is an address 0, they were still passing and never will got reverted in line 135. So all the chat proof, there is a lot of chats, but none of the chats were able to provide the guardians to preventing the exploit. So this is one of the biggest mistakes, but it's not the last one. There is another issue where also causing the problem is after analyzing and decoding, understand how the interaction and the call data were passing, we look back into the main contract. Here, oh, sorry. Yeah, and we find out that actually within the contract itself, they have 2 deposit functions. And they have a very similar, input parameter where you can see it's a domain, destination domain ID, resource ID, and call data. But you can tell from the name side, one is deposit and the other one is called like deposit ETH. So what we believe is that the deposit, the engineer were intended is like they allow each of the user, if they want to deposit any of the ERC20 token contract, they can call this function. And deposit ETH will be particularly only handling for depositing the ETH type of tokens. But now, what is the problem here? You can pretty much you can tell it's like from the line 209 and 225. They actually are sharing the same event log, meaning that deposit a ERC20 and deposit a ETH is not making a huge difference from the logging system, right? And what that reflecting means is, meaning that you can deposit one Apple coin maybe, and then you will receiving an entire 1 ETH. So you're comparing like apple and orange. So this is where people can making the profit from. So some of the summary what we learned here is, first, you always need to separate the token operation and even the event logs. Don't try, sometimes we understand engineer were doing like a quick job, but don't try to write some, sloppy code, because one line of code will making like a huge difference. If this is 2 obligations and behavior, even though it's very similar, just try to separate it out. And then we always recommend to verify all the injected input. Even though this is a simple validation, you still have to do it. Always keep the eyes, maybe learn from the most recent exploit, seeing like is there any similar vulnerability might be causing, or maybe like sharing within your contract. And then also like if times allow and your budget allow, always looking for like auditing on the core component of each of the sides from the bridge. So now this is some of the few items, like if just in case if there is an incident happen, if you're building a cross-bridge solution product. So very first hand, what we recommend to do is first pause the token transfer and related functions first, help the product, and then immediately informing the community, exchanges, and maybe like platform partner, just make sure that they were able to monitoring the money movement. And then setting up the community channel, bridging and inviting the respected team from the security expert, or maybe your order like security engineer quicker to identify the issue. And then don't try to be rushed, but always like doing a patch fix in terms of identifying, verifying, and then test it, and then lastly, like deploy it on the mainnet. And then at the end, will be highly recommended is like making an assess on the damage, evaluate how much you can work with the community to making the transparency on how to recovering with their loss, or maybe like how to helping the project to be moving forward in the next steps. So in here, the best practice, I would say like the best practice for Web3 is very similar to a regular software development practice. So we always wishing the team that can have like at least like a peer review on the design on your white paper, or maybe like some of the tech stack. Understanding the complexity of the system and each of the module to have several rounds of discussions, and then usually perform like code review during the development cycle. At least I will have multiple eyes. People were able to capture some of the fault ahead of time. And at the end, always writing tests, even for common corner case and system integration tests. I know that this is a lot of work, but this is highly recommended to have it. If your team also having a resource allow, we recommend to create like a written threat model to identify which are the weakness part of your system. And then it probably can also work with some of the security expert in the field to, when you guys having like a security audit, you can share with them, it's like, this is some of the item that we might having a concern. So the security expert might have a knowledge about, okay, how to do, or maybe providing recommendation on the particular review sessions. And then at the end, yes, so make sure you will, if anything's allowed, it's like getting a source code audit on every single change commit that you guys have made. And thank you so much for everyone, and this is my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, we have few folks that will be staying around to answering all these like security questions. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Connie. All right, guys, so no more sloppy code. You have no more excuses. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so our next speaker, one of the cool things about these events is that we get to engage with the community, but we also get to introduce key members of our team to the community. And one of the things we always hear within the Avalanche community is that the team is great and the team's accessible. And so on that note, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who you probably have heard about or have seen before, but he's going to be here to talk about our perspective on Web3 and how we at Avalabs, and by extension in the Avalanche community, are thinking about this space. So please join me in giving a warm round of welcome, whatever you want to say, to our very own John Nahas.
Thank you, Devin. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here in Seoul with you all. I'd like to take a moment first and say thank you to everybody for showing up today, for your cooperation and the changes that got us to where we are and everything that's happening. It's beautiful to be in Seoul and to be working with so many of you and meeting you. As Devin mentioned, I'm John Nahas, Vice President of Business Development at Avalabs, supporting Avalanche. And today, what I want to talk to you guys about is the Web3 world according to Avalanche. So we've been hearing a lot over the course of the past year plus about Web3. What is Web3? A million different definitions, and everybody kind of has their own idea about it. But we're here to talk to you about what we believe it to be. Web3 is something that's practical and it's achievable. With determination, focus, and some hard work, we can really achieve what we believe Web3 to be, which is a global, decentralized, and digital economy. It's a place where anyone, developers, artists, creators, corporations, all can come together to create a new economy that's digital and interconnected, linked by technology across the world, without intermediaries, without middlemen, without rent seekers. The goal of Web3 ultimately is to break down barriers and unlock potential. But first things first, what is wrong with Web3 today? What are the issues? First of all, there's a high barrier to entry. Let's be very frank. The people in this room know what Web3 is. They know how to interact with Web3. But for the most part, Web3 is a little elitist. And what I mean by that is there's a high barrier of entry. We need to educate people. We need to make things easier. We need to make it more accessible to the masses and the millions and tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people that we wish to onboard into this new digital economy. Second, it's unreliable. We just heard from Serdik about security issues. There's hacks. There's gas spikes. Some chains tend to go down sometimes. There's hiccups. There's a lot of inconsistencies that if we want to create a new system, that needs to be reliable. And finally, it's siloed. Certain chains have certain niches. You go somewhere for NFTs and somewhere else for DeFi. At the end of the day, if we really want to create a digital economy, it needs to bring everything together. It needs to bring DeFi with enterprises and everything along that way. You know, it makes me think of where we are right now in the current economy, the Web3 economy. I don't think we're at any kind of an end, but I think we're at the end of the beginning and we're just getting started. So, what do we need to win? These are the three pillars of focus that we need to pay attention to. And the first one is wallets. Wallets, simply put, are users. The more users, the more wallets, the more people that are in this economy. Second, assets. Assets need to be digitized. We went from a time in history where assets were physical to currently a lot of assets are electronic, but they're not digital. There's trillions of dollars of real-world assets that can be tokenized, brought on-chain, and into a Web3 world. And finally, applications. Applications are how users and wallets interact their assets with one another. So, how do we get there? If you're familiar with Ava Labs and the business development team, this slide is familiar to you. Because this is how we break down our business development team, starting all the way in the beginning with the most traditional of markets. That's your institutional and capital markets. That's TradFi, that's banks, it's financial services. These guys haven't changed. They won't change unless they need to. But that's a major source of a lot of the world's assets. You move over a little bit, that's enterprises. That's the corporations that we deal with on a daily basis. Your Amazons, your Microsofts, your Facebooks, and everything like that. They're ripe for innovation, and they're starting to see the world in a Web3 lens. Next, exchanges and wallets. Again, users. This is usually the entry point for most people's first foray into Web3. So if you look at the numbers, right, that talk about the total number of users of crypto, whatever it is, 20, 30 million. A vast majority of that are people who just do this. They buy a token on some exchange and they speculate. But the real Web3 world is about 10% of that. It's like a couple million people. And that's where exchanges and wallets get into Web3, starting with GameFi. We've seen with the rise of GameFi and play to earn, the ability to bring in tens, if not hundreds of millions of people into this economy. Reason being, this demographic is technologically savvy. They love to play. They love to do things on their computers, on their mobile phones. That's a key source to allow people to enter a Web3 world. Next, of course, NFTs. We've all been hearing about NFTs, but we're only just seeing the beginning of the surface of what NFTs can be and the future that it possibly has, right? Profile pictures and all these things are fantastic, but in a real future where we bring everything into Web3, NFTs will represent contracts, diplomas, certifications, documents that can be traded or borrowed against or loaned or things of that nature. And then finally, of course, DeFi, the bleeding edge of technology, decentralized finance, which seeks to change the institutional and capital markets for the better. However, I will say, up until this point, we've tried to rework and reimagine the current existing systems in a better way. The real exciting part, the part of Web3 that excites me, is something that I don't know what comes next. And hopefully someone here today will be building it. And that's where we keep going here into Web3 native. So that's really the exciting part, I think, where we continue to grow and build Web3. So, great. We know where we are. We know what we're missing. But where do we go from here? So how does Avalanche see the future? We see millions, if not billions, of people benefiting from a Web3 ecosystem. abstracting away the crypto complexity that makes it hard for the masses, for our friends and family members, and the millions of people who, to them, what we do is still confusing. We need to fade it into the background. When you send money using Venmo or PayPal or Zelle or any app, you don't know if you're using FedWire or SWIFT or SEPA. When you're on Netflix, it doesn't say Netflix powered by AWS. Those key infrastructure pieces are abstracted away into the background, and all you know is you're using something that works. We see Avalanche powering global adoption in a future that is faster. The Web3 world cannot be slower than what currently exists today. It can't take longer to send money to a friend if you have to wait several minutes or God knows how long for a transaction to finalize. Avalanche finalizes transactions in less than a second. A metric that we always hear about is TPS, transactions per second. That's fantastic. Anybody can make up a number about TPS. But how long does it take for that transaction to finalize? If you're sending value, if you're sending information, if you're transacting at a global scale, it has to be near instant, and Avalanche has that. We see the world as inexpensive. As I mentioned, you can't disintermediate intermediaries by charging just as much, if not more. Sending some USDC from one person to another can't cost more than it costs to send a wire at the bank. For people to really jump into this new world, it needs to make financial sense to ditch the world that they currently know and trust for something that's still new and that might be a little bit questionable to them. Avalanche is inexpensive as can be without sacrificing security and stability of the network. If you notice, I said inexpensive. I didn't say cheap, because things that are cheap don't always work so well. Focus is on being inexpensive. The future needs to be usable. To put it bluntly, it needs to be easier than what exists now. If it's not easier, no one's going to use it. So we need intuitive flows, better UI and better UX that just works. If you've used Avalanche before, you know that Avalanche just works. And the future needs to be decentralized. If it's not decentralized, it's also not worth it. We have centralized systems. We have centralized players. We have intermediaries that do the things that exist on a daily basis already. If it's not decentralized, you might as well just be using a database. Avalanche is truly decentralized. We have the third highest Nakamoto coefficient, the true test of decentralization after Bitcoin and Ethereum. And after the merge, let's see what happens with the Nakamoto coefficient of Ethereum. But we're very proud that little less than 2 years since mainnet launch, Avalanche has over 1,250 validators and even growing. So we're truly decentralized. 1,600. Is that 16 today? It's at 16 today. And the future needs to be sustainable. The technology of the future cannot be emitting as much carbon as the existing established entities that we have. We can't be the technology of the future if we're not sustainable, if we're not using less energy and less carbon. Avalanche is green. A report commissioned by the Crypto Carbons Ratings Institute. These are the guys that did the seminal Bitcoin carbon footprint paper. Technical Institute of Munich, MIT, their focus is on sustainability. They're the guys that are on the news talking about how Bitcoin uses 8.5 million US households worth of carbon. Ethereum currently uses 1.6 million US households worth of carbon. That's the proof of work chains. If you move over to proof of stake, we are all that are proof of stake chains, including Avalanche, in a world of our own. But even among the proof of stake chains, Avalanche is in a world of its own. The entirety of the Avalanche ecosystem, doing almost 2 million transactions a day, billions of dollars transacted, 1,400, 1,500, 1,600 validators, utilizes the equivalent of 46 US households worth of energy. That is 12 business class flights, 12 business class seats from LA to Munich and back. The technology of the future needs to be green, and Avalanche is green. So, we know all the benefits of Avalanche, but how do we see that Web3 world succeeding, and how is Avalanche contributing to that? Avalanche has all these ingredients. We see Avalanche bolstering adoption through subnets, of course, what we believe to be the true scaling solution for the future. Subnets are custom app-specific chains, or like the head of innovation at MasterCard called them the other day in a seminar, business-specific chains. Because if you're an enterprise, if you're a business, you cannot be on the same chain as everything else. It's silly to think that a chain that has DeFi and NFTs and a million other things is also going to house a major corporation's business or do things of that nature. Corporations need to protect privacy, they need to protect financial data, they need to protect a lot of things. So subnets allow builders to focus on what they're best at. If you're a game developer, your focus should be on building a game. It shouldn't be on decentralized systems and on blockchain technology. Your focus should be on building the best game possible. Avalanche supports you by giving you a subnet. Think of it as blockchain as a service. You get a blockchain, you get RPCs, you get APIs, you get an Explorer, and you get an amazing wallet, like the Core wallet, to help you and to kind of navigate this Web3 world. Better products, as I just mentioned. One of them being, of course, the Core wallet. Alva Labs recently released the Core wallet with the primary focus of supporting subnets. You shouldn't have to click a menu and drop down and change RPCs and do a million things. It's silly and it's not usable and it's not user-friendly. The Core wallet is the first wallet that intends to support Avalanche, and it supports Ethereum, but also will support subnets with a single click. You can switch from Avalanche C-Chain and go from DeFi straight into DeFi Kingdoms or Krabata or any of the games that are coming. And we have about 70 subnets slated to launch by the end of the year. And of course, for those of you that have been in the ecosystem long enough, you've definitely used the bridge, which has done over $50 billion worth of transactions between Avalanche and Ethereum, and recently launched support for Bitcoin, the asset that brought us all into this space in the first place. Instead of it sitting idle or on some centralized exchange, you can bridge your Bitcoin into Avalanche, earn yield, and use it in DeFi. And finally, the best technology and the best products are only as good as the partners that use it. So that's you all here today, and that's the people that we're really happy to be working with. Since launch, Avalanche has 1,500 dApps launched on chain, hundreds of partners ranging from DeFi, NFTs, enterprises such as Lemonade, Tog, Deloitte, MasterCard working with us. So we're really proud of the community that we've grown. That community allows our products to be used on technology we believe to be unrivaled. And we're really excited to be doing all of this here. So in conclusion, this is how we see the Web3 world. We see it powering global adoption. We see you being the supporters who help us achieve it. So this is how we bring builders and users together. So thank you all for being here today, and I'll be around and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
The one and only John Nahas, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Well, speaking of subnets, obviously, if you know anything about Avalanche, you know that we're pretty excited about subnets. And here to talk about subnets and how to get started building one, deploying one, what they are, is one of our most senior engineers. He's been working on this. In fact, subnets are his full-time job now. So please put your hands together to welcome Connor Daly up on the stage.
Hey everybody. One of our most senior engineers. What's crazy is that actually is kind of true. But yeah, I've been with Ava Labs almost 2 years now, and I've kind of done a bunch of different jobs as you kind of do at a startup, and I started out doing dApp development, smart contracts, Solidity, and stuff like that, but for the last 6 months I've really focused exclusively on subnets. And one of the things I realized when I started working on subnets is that they were really hard to build and really hard to get started with. So my goal for everything I do right now is how do we make subnets easier and easier to use? How do we make it so that anyone can start building with subnets regardless of their prior experience? and how can you launch your hello world, your first subnet in just a couple minutes. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to teach you all how to build your first subnet. So I'm going to cover what subnets are and how to get started building them. Yep, so yeah, that's my little demo. And there will be a little time for Q&A. I did actually, was originally going to do a live demo and kind of show you some of this, but had to pivot at the last minute due to the venue change. So I'm going to have some screenshots to show you instead. It'll still be great though. But first off, what's a subnet? So John talked about this a little minute ago, but I think it's really important to think of with the concept of scaling. So in technology, we talk about horizontal and vertical scaling. Vertical scaling is basically trying to make something as fast and efficient as possible, but you only have one of them. And so in terms of blockchains, if we scale blockchains vertically, that means kind of more and more TPS, trying to process faster and faster with more hardware, better algorithms, stuff like that, but only using a single monolithic chain. Horizontal scaling, on the other hand, is about running multiple chains in parallel. And if you can do that, you have a bunch of different independent chains, and each of them can process 100 transactions per second on their own, and you can kind of just sum how many transactions you can do at a time. So the reason I bring this up is that subnets are Avalanche's horizontal scaling format. So this means that subnets are about running multiple blockchains in parallel. And those blockchains don't actually all have to be the same thing. We're not just running multiple copies of Ethereum. They can actually be running all kinds of different, what we call virtual machines. And they also run different validator sets. So I'm going to talk about both these things. So these are the two things to know about subnets. So the first one is the virtual machine. The virtual machine basically defines how to process transactions, and validator sets are who can process these transactions. So the virtual machine basically defines like what are the rules of the chain, what formats can you expect, what transactions are valid, what operations can you do. The most famous virtual machine that people know is the Ethereum virtual machine. But Bitcoin also has a virtual machine. Solana has a virtual machine. Cardano has a virtual machine. And they're all different. And so all of these virtual machines can actually run on Avalanche. They're just application logic that determines when we get a transaction, how do we process it? And the Avalabs team is actually works on building these different subnet VMs as well. So we've created several. We've created the AVM, which runs Avalanche's X-Chain. We've also created the subnet EVM, which is a way to fork an EVM and run it as a subnet. And we've also created some things that are entirely new, like the Spaces VM, which is actually a file storage virtual machine, kind of like Filecoin, that you can run on Avalanche. So the other thing you need to build a blockchain is, in addition to the virtual machine, you need the validator set. So like I said before, the validator set is who can process these transactions. So, in proof of work networks, you have miners. In proof of stake networks, you have validators. And so who gets to be a validator for your subnet? So this is a cool thing about Avalanche is it's configurable. You can actually have public subnets that anyone can be a validator, or you can have private networks where only certain whitelisted individuals can be validators. And one of the cool things is you don't have to just pick one extreme or the other. You can actually use complex logic to pick some middle ground. So for example, if the Korean government wanted to launch its own blockchain that created a central bank currency for the won, it might say that only Korean citizens could be validators, and that's actually kind of a logic that you could implement on top of Avalanche. So it really kind of allows you to have this spectrum of fully permissionless to totally permissioned, because there's a lot of different use cases out there. So that's kind of like what a subnet is, but it's a lot of talk, it's a lot of promise. So the real question is, what has been built? What is available today for you guys to use? So the most important thing to know about is the subnet EVM. I think this is our most popular thing that we built. And this is a way for you to create your own EVM instance and run it as a subnet. And what's cool is you don't just have to run a standard EVM instance. You can actually customize it. And how do you customize it? You don't actually have to fork it on GitHub. You can actually just use a little JSON file to configure it. It's really cool. So you can change things like define your gas parameters for how fast or how slow you want to run the network. There's trade-offs. You know, most people want to think you want to run as fast as possible, but the more speed you use, the more expensive your validators are going to be to run. So there's some trade-offs. But yeah, you can basically decide your gas fees, and you can also add what are called custom precompiles. So precompiles are actually a way of customizing the blockchain in its code and kind of activating or deactivating these changes. And so we have 4 precompiles that we have built already and released publicly. So one is a contract deployment whitelist. So this allows you to basically prevent anyone that is not authorized from deploying contracts on your network. And so one of the cool things about subnets is you can use them to build application-specific blockchains. And if you do that, if I build one for my game that I just created, I don't want some other person I don't know to come and build a DeFi app on my chain or launch their NFT project. So this makes sure that only I and the people who I explicitly give permission to can deploy contracts on the chain. You can also do the same thing for issuing transactions on the network. So if you wanted to build a KYC subnet, you could use this functionality to bring users in one at a time as they get approved. And then we also have another one for native asset minting, which is kind of just a building block that you need if you've already launched your token on the C chain and want to use it as a gas token. And then lastly, there is the ability to change your fee configuration, because one of the things about setting these gas parameters right now is it's more of an art than a science. And some projects are very hesitant to make really big decisions about changing the gas parameters. And this makes it really easy so that you don't have to do what would have used to be a hard fork to change them. So right now, for validators, we only support permission validators for proof of authority networks. So this is kind of where we're starting at. So if you want to build a subnet and launch it in production, you need to bring 5 validators into the equation that you will explicitly give permission to. So that's what we're starting out of. That was the easiest thing for us to implement to get to market. But the next biggest thing on our roadmap is permissionless subnets, where you can have anyone be a validator. But yeah, so that's coming soon. And the other thing I want to throw out, the other hard problem with subnets is if you're running blockchains in parallel, how do you get them to talk to each other? How do you get tokens across subnets? And so right now, all of our projects are using their own bridges to move tokens back and forth and do cross-chain messaging using things like Layer 0. So we are actually building a platform-native cross-subnet communication protocol, and that's also very shortly in the roadmap. So that'll be coming soon. So that'll make it so that you don't need any bridges to use subnets, and you'll be able to just transfer assets seamlessly. So now I want to talk about tools. So this is my baby here. This is called the Avalanche CLI, and I've been working on it for probably about 2 or 3 months now. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. You know, how do we make it so that developers can build their first subnets in just a few minutes? And so this is a brand new tool that is an all-in-one place that you need. You don't have to go to multiple repositories. You don't have to know 10 different sources of knowledge. It's all just one place, everything presented for you, so that if you need to know where to go to start, you go here. And what I'm really proud of is, yeah, you can use it. The first time you use it, you can launch your first subnet in 30 seconds if you're fast. It's very quick. It's very simple to use. It's designed to give you good choices and to not give you bad choices, so that if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you'll still end up with a good outcome. And yeah, you can use it to deploy instances of subnet EVM or custom virtual machines if you're really adventurous and want to build, you know, kind of the next the next EVM or something like that. So it is still very new, so we're still rolling out features basically weekly. And if I give this talk again in a month, it'll look very different just because we're iterating on it very quickly. But right now, today, it supports deployments on your local network and on Fuji. And mainnet is probably going to come in about a month. And so if you really need to go to production before that, you need to still use subnet CLI, but this tool will entirely be replacing that in the very near future. So now, this is the part of my presentation. I was going to do a live coding thing, but we can't do that. So sorry, apologies for these screenshots. OK. So this is this tool. I tried to make it very English languagey, so you can just kind of write sentences for what you want to do. But it's called Avalanche CLI, and you use it by calling the Avalanche command. And this is just kind of the main help message. But there's some different modules. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you create your first subnet is create a subnet configuration. And the way you do that is by saying Avalanche subnet create, and then the name of your subnet. And so here we provide you menus, we provide you prompts, we try to give you everything you need to be successful. And the other thing that I was thinking of is if you just press enter like 5 times, you'll get something good. So the default option is always a good choice. So the first thing you have to do is pick what kind of subnet you want. You're almost always going to want subnet EVM. Then you have to pick a chain ID. Basically, it can be any number. When you go to production, you want to pick a more specific number, but don't worry about that to get started. You want to pick a token name for your subnet. My nickname is DOS Connor from college, so I use the DOS token. That's the one I always use. Now you get to pick, how do you want to set gas fees? So there's some different trade-offs here, but we recommend low disk use, low throughput. That's the best option. There's some faster options too if you want to be adventurous, but you can give those a shot. Then you have to figure out, how do you want to distribute funds? So you can set up a custom airdrop, but the best thing to do is we actually will have an option to airdrop 1 million tokens to a test address. So we have a well-known private key that you can use so that if you just use the same key over and over in your software, you can store it any way you want, but it'll just always have funds dropped to it. So we use this. It's pretty convenient. And then we also have ways, like I mentioned earlier, to customize your subnet EVM instance. So if you're just getting started, just pick no. But I wanted to show you guys this menu and what it looks like. So let's say you do want to modify your EVM. You can choose which precompile you want to add, and whenever we release a new one, we add it to the tool. So you pick which one you want to add, and then now, for the way most of these work is you have to add a list of admins that can use this precompile, and so you can kind of choose like add admin, then you have to enter the address that you want, and then boom, you added it. You can preview that. You can remove admins. You can just customize the list. Eventually, hit done. And then you can add more precompiles. We'll say no. And then now we've created our subnet configuration. And so now there's also a describe command. So if you want to just kind of get a preview of what you just created, it'll actually show you, kind of broken down all the details, all the configurations, who you're airdropping to, what precompiles, what admins you're using, stuff like that, in just like a nice, easy to read format. And then there's actually an option you can export the Genesis file. So this is, I mentioned earlier, you kind of customize this guy with the JSON file. This is the actual JSON that we use behind the scenes. And you can just export that and use that in your own tool if you wanted to build something like this for yourself. So now you've created the configuration. How do you actually use it? So we have this subnet deploy operation. So you type in Avalanche subnet deploy, then the name of the subnet you want to use. And so now you have 3 options. Do you want to deploy locally? Do you want to deploy on Fuji? Do you want to deploy on mainnet? Mainnet is coming soon, but let's just do local for now. And basically, there's no more choices after that. We'll actually just set this up for you. It'll launch multiple, it'll launch a local network on your computer. It'll download any files that it needs. It'll deploy your subnet. and then it'll give you all the information you need to add it to MetaMask and to interact with it. So now you can deploy to Fuji. So Fuji is a little bit more complicated. You actually have to use keys, and it's not as easy. We're still trying to make it as easy as possible, and it's going to improve over time. But kind of the first thing you need to do is generate a key that you can use to sign transactions. You have to airdrop, or you can go to our faucet and get AVOX delivered to this address. You do have to move it from the C chain to the P chain, which is a little annoying, but we have a tutorial for it. Then you do the same thing, Avalanche subnet deploy. You select which network you want to deploy on. So we choose Fuji. And then you choose which key you want to use to sign. I had a couple on my computer when I took the screenshot, so we'll use the key we just created. And then now you have to choose who's going to be the admin for your network. You have to set what are called control keys. So we have some text kind of explaining what that is. And when you add your control keys, you have to add the P-chain addresses, so you can enter these. And then you have to decide how many control keys you want to use to activate all the operations in your network. So basically, you can configure a multi-sig to control your subnet by default if you'd like to. But just for this demo, yeah, we just said 1. And then eventually, your subnet will deploy on Fuji, and it'll add this information for you. And this is, like I said, this demo will be very different in a couple weeks. We already have a change coming in our next release that's going to make this a lot prettier, because I hate this screen. But yeah, this will tell you, yeah, these are your blockchain IDs, stuff like that. So that's where I'm going to stop for now, just because there's more you can do. There's a process of adding validators, but we've got some really great tutorials on that. So notionally, if you want to start building subnets, you want to start with local deployment. It's free, it's easy, it takes 30 seconds. Then once you've figured out exactly what you want to use, you can deploy to Fuji. That's a bit more complicated process, but then when you finally figured out your Fuji deployment, then you can go to mainnet. So sorry if I'm standing in front of this QR code, but yeah, we do have some tutorials for all this. Like I said, mainnet's coming soon. This is a link to the local deployment tutorial. They're very close together. I'm also going to make these slides available afterwards. And the way I will do that is I will, this is my Twitter account. I'll just tweet about these after, so if you want to follow me, I'll distribute them later. But we have 2 minutes for questions if anybody wants to ask some real quick. Okay, what's up? Oh yeah, all right, cool.
Hello. Aha. Question? Would you let us know who you are and where you're from, and then the question?
Okay, I'm a software developer at StanWorld, and I had a question about mainnet. When is mainnet coming? And I heard Fuji, develop first at locally, then Fuji to mainnet. So Fuji is like a test net?
Yes, yes. So Fuji is our test net, so you can get tokens from Fuji for free. There's a faucet that'll deliver them to your computer. You can run a validator very quickly. We have tutorials for that as well. And mainnet support is probably going to come in about a month. So yeah, we're working on it now. The guys back at home who aren't traveling are hard at work on that. And as soon as I get back, we're going to try to wrap it up. All right, any other questions?
I think we might have some over on this side. Let me wander around. So you said mainnet's coming in a month, but you didn't say which month, right? We don't want to say which month. In a month.
Things take time.
A particular month of the year.
I'll never give deadlines for anybody else's project, but I will, for my own. Sometimes there will probably be delays, but we ship a new release every 1 to 2 weeks, so we're iterating quite quickly.
No team more prolific and productive than the Avalabs engineering crew.
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? Yeah. One in the back.
Hi, this is Nick with Generation. As a validator, how?
There you are.
Yeah. So we need to onboard our own validator, or is it like we need to bring 5 other validators?
Yeah.
Right.
So the reason you need 5 validators is because you need to be able to rotate them to do upgrades one at a time. And if you bring down more than 20% of your network will start to slow down. So right now, you do have to find your own validators, but if you're a serious project and are really looking to launch, I would highly recommend you contact Avalabs because we provide a lot of support with helping match people to validators. Kind of more private now. There's no like public marketplace, but that is something that I think a lot of people are working on. And I know there's a lot of interest in the community from validators who want to validate subnets. So the technically correct answer right now is yes, you have to find your own. You can run multiple of them yourselves if you want, but I would say the best thing is to contact the business department at Avalabs, talk to John over here in the front sofa, or Joe, or any of the other Avalabs team members here, and we can get you talking to the right people. All right.
You got any more? Hello, hello. Aha. Can we just leave this mic on? Can we do that? That'll be easier. Any more questions for Connor? And he's not disappearing, by the way. So Connor's going to be around, as are all the other lab staff. I think maybe we'll call it for now.
Yep.
Unless there's any more questions.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Connor Daly, thank you very much. All right, great. So we're going to take a break now. We're going to change things up a little bit. I know we've been giving you a lot of information. So right now, I would invite you to get some food, enjoy the arcade area back there. We have yoga starting at 1:30. So if there's anybody around here who feels like some yoga might be in your near future, we have yoga coming up. Also, if you could get on social media or get into your DMs and let all your friends know that when we come back from lunch around 2:30, we're going to be giving away tickets to the Formula E race. So if you guys have never been to an FE race, I would highly encourage you to take advantage of that. And if you show back up after lunch, you'll stand a chance to win some tickets. We'll be giving some away. So thanks for your support so far. Enjoy. If you have any questions, if you need anything, come find somebody from the team. We'll be happy to accommodate, but we'll see you again in a couple hours. Okay. Welcome back. We're going to get things back on track here. We got some really cool talks and some fun stuff planned for this afternoon. I hope you guys are filling your bellies and filling your hearts and minds with the friends from the community. Something we've heard a lot about of late is, exploits and rug pulls, and cybersecurity has become quite an important topic. How many people in the room here have been the victim of some kind of exploit, or have had their money stolen, or something bad happened to them? Hopefully not too many hands, but I see a few going up. Well, when we talk about founders and we talk about how we could equip them with the skills that they need to succeed, one of the biggest reasons for failure can be a security flaw that could take down your DApp, and that'll be the end of your business. People are quite unforgiving. And so we're really happy to have our friends from Hacking here today. And Yev is going to be talking about some practical skills and things that you guys can do to make sure that whatever you're building is going to be more secure. Did I do a decent job there? Okay. Okay. Please welcome Yev.
Hi everyone, it's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'd be happy to share our experience of securing hundreds of projects through the last 5 years of Hacking. Great, we should start. So quick background on Hacking, what we do. We're a cybersecurity company focusing on smart contract audits, penetration testing, and bug bounty, and working with ethical hackers to help companies to uncover vulnerabilities ahead of time before actually cyber criminals can exploit them. Through this 5 years experience, we worked with various companies, including Avalanche ecosystem and Avalanche itself. And I'd be happy to share quick tips how to build securely and how not to be exploited at the end of the day. So what is security? Quick theory. So security is the process of protecting assets and protecting them from threats. in different levels. If we're addressing a Web3 project, what's going behind the scene, at the end of the day, it's people and operations, it's Web3 layer, Web2 layer, and all the processes we should secure along the way. And it's really important to understand what your key assets in any system you build, and the process, and how you interact with this process across different teams and subjects. So definitely we hear a lot of different problems on the level of cybersecurity, both on the smart contracts, on operations side, on the company side, on still Web 2, and application, mobile, web infrastructure. And it's good to build the threat model before actually starting build the process and the product out of there. Yes, if we're addressing Web 2 vulnerabilities, it still exists. Even this week, the problem with Curve roads happened not on the layer Web 3, but on the layer of Web 2, on still centralized Web 2 infrastructure, and how we can rely on Web 3 if we still build on the Web 2, and the single point of failure is on that level. So, based on our experience through auditing around 50 crypto exchanges, the common mistakes we saw during all this process and during all these years, definitely the top one, and I guess most critical one, is kind of race conditions, when the input field's not filtered enough and you, as a cyber criminal, get access to unlimited money you can generate just out of the application. The next very crucial part is about personal information on the level of passports and KYCs. Unfortunately, a lot of projects integrate KYC by third parties and do that incorrectly. And that's why we see all this leaked data, leaked passports, and that's what we saw during the audits of crypto exchanges. Now it's getting way better, but in 2017, when we just started, it was easily possible to get access to passports through just enumerating the ID, because all this information was public without proper access control. The other problem that we see is definitely on the password level. Now crypto exchanges do a great job on securing that and providing at least requirements to passwords and password policies, but still, like broken password reset policy, being able to brute force that easily, being able to get access to this second factor is still a huge problem via different crypto exchanges. And if we are talking about still Web 2 and operations, what we saw from some of the penetration tests, that a lot of problems are on the leaked keys to Discords, to some GitHubs, and still, I'm pretty sure for a lot of builders, there are a lot of information circulating over private communication via Teams, like in Discord, Slack, whatever, and it's pretty crucial to have this communication secured. Or another common problem that a lot of projects still, unfortunately, have their passwords sharing via Google spreadsheets. And it's still something that we receive via our bug bounty platform, that hackers can get access to all these public, not really secured enough spreadsheets, and get access to a lot of critical resources to the projects. Going further, it's interesting report on chain analysis that how the victims changing over the time from 2019 to nowadays. And if we see that in 2019, it was really huge target centralized exchanges, now we see that the focus on DeFi protocols. And honestly, now when everything is transparent, everything is on chain and can be tracked, that's even more important, and it's important to be ahead of hackers, because they are one step ahead, and everyone is monitoring blockchain and gets access to any suspicious activity, suspicious transactions first, and just go and exploit that. So actually, this number is not accurate anymore. In the recent hack of Curve, this number is bigger on 500K. We've heard a lot, like I guess the August started with a lot of different hacks, and probably a lot of you heard about that. The problem still, for example, with the Slope wallet was on the Web 2 layer. It's not about smart contract audits, it's about source code review that can help prevent that, but probably it wasn't done. Yeah, the numbers are huge. You can go to Rect and check that out, all the information about recent hacks and postmortem on that. So, how to protect, how to be sure that the product you are building won't be on this Rect leaderboard next? That's a really good question, and it's actually a complex process that starts not from the audit, but from the very beginning while you're planning the project itself. Because a lot of projects think that they can just pass the audit of small smart contract, but not the whole infrastructure and processes, and be sure that they won't be hacked. That's not true. And here's like basic steps that every project should consider while doing project and want to do that securely from the scratch. So first, definitely it starts from the security first mindset. It means that you think about security as a functionality that you want to implement to your project. Next is about secure SDLC along all the development stages. Yep, and only after that you can rely on audits and go through bug bounties and insurance. And all these steps is about defense in depth when you build these walls in order to protect your product from very beginning. Let's go deeper over all these steps. So as I mentioned, it's good to think about security from the day one and build with the security mindset. So it's not when you implement security at the testing stage of your project when it could be really expensive to fix the issues, but at the beginning. Next is good to understand the risks. So having the threat modeling of all your system at the beginning help you to understand what actually do to prevent future hacks. Because you understand the threats you have, the likelihood of how, like, when it can happen, and also the risks associated with that. Unfortunately, that a lot of project lag these days is about documentation, because everyone doing project in rush, doing that in order to launch faster, but we see that a lot of problems starting here. Because the broken communication about the functionality you want to actually develop and what you have at the end, usually it's different, and it's good to have all documented in order to prevent this misunderstanding and the broken functionality. Because from what we see from audits, there are a lot of situations when projects state on their website one information, and in fact they have totally different smart contract doing different stuff with different numbers, different allocations, and it's not something that like user can easily check. Also, it's good to be open over all your security activities. If you go to like medium project on crypto, you can see that usually it's like we've audited by this company, and in most cases that's all, but it's not enough. It's good to be transparent on what components you use, how you ensure that audits is not just for a small functionality but cover all the system, how you work with responsible disclosure, and what you have in terms of something happened like insurance. Yeah, and it's good to be prepared actually, because if all these walls are fallen, you should have incident response plan and responsible person who will handle that, or better team. Yeah, it's one of the methodologies from Synopsys which states how security should be implemented over all the steps of developing the project, starting from planning, designing, then implementing that. Because a lot of projects just go for security on the stage 4 when it's released. They just do some quick internal checks, then external audits, and that's all. But it's something that should be considered on every stage while building the product. If we're talking about smart contract layer and protocol layer, there are a lot of different vulnerabilities, and it's quite well categorized and tested already, and it can be easily found on the resources with all the classification and test cases how to cover these issues, which is commonly known. And yeah, already have the kind of OWASP checklist, but in crypto for smart contracts. Going further, talking about security audits, nowadays a lot of projects just think that it's enough to check small piece of that, but not covering the full functionality and doing that continuously. And it's not like that. You should be ready for the audit, because you definitely don't want auditors to do something that your team can do by themselves. At least launch automated tools, fix all these basic issues, have proper test coverage, have proper documentation. There are a lot of different, honestly, goals for audits when they come to auditors. Of course, first should be security, but in a lot of cases, it's just about marketing and building trust with the community, saying that we've been audited by this auditor and you should trust these results. But it should be done in order to actually mitigate risks and provide proper access controls and proper controls actually to all the potential issues. And why it's needed? Because how the typical project looks like, a lot of outsourced developers, lack of in-house expertise, shared CTOs, and it's difficult to find the full responsible person for security within the team. And it's good if you have that one. Yes, so how to prepare for the audit? Definitely you should start from yourself, understand what you need to have proper documentation in place, describing all the main functionality you have, and it definitely should be up to date, because it influences the time how auditors quick can understand and fully understand the functionality that you do. After that, you should schedule that in advance, because reputable vendors have kind of long queues, and it's good to understand by picking the vendor that they match your expertise and the technology stack you use. Yep, and after all this preparation done, you should agree on the scope, be prepared to fix the bugs. A lot of issues also arise when a lot of projects receive the audit, but they just don't fix that, unfortunately, or don't think it's important. They publish this report with all these vulnerabilities, and that's all. It's definitely not the right approach to addressing security issues. Yeah, and after all, it's good to share with the community, with your project holders, that you've done the audit, here's the results, here's how we mitigated the potential risks, and usually all these audits are public. And it's good when it's integrated to any major aggregators like CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko for users to easily actually access that and see what's the security state of the project. Yeah, here is the auditors you might know already that you can use, and here's a link for more auditors. There are a lot of them specializing in different stuff. Local, global, based on Rust, EVMs, and different. So pick the right one and be sure you're prepared for the audit. The next step usually links in the area of bug bounties. You probably heard about these white hat hackers that helping companies actually to uncover vulnerabilities and then report them in the proper way. So it's called vulnerability disclosure policies and bug bounties as a method of rewarding hackers for actually contributing to the security of the project. Unfortunately, I will share statistics later. Not that many crypto projects have that. So in a nutshell, bug bounty is a kind of crowdsourced security engagement when you ask friendly hackers to help you to find vulnerabilities and report it to them. Because these days, a lot of projects just, ignore that. And hackers, even if they want and they have good willing to help projects, they can't do that. Because they are trying to reach out to projects via Twitter, Discord, Telegram, whatever. And due to ineffectiveness in communications within the team or within the communities, it's not that possible and easily reporting vulnerabilities. But the good process is set it up when you have at least security email, you have bug bounty in place and vulnerability disclosure policies. If we saw that sometimes audits and bug bounties cost way less than you can lose in the next hack. Yeah, this is some of the traditional Web 2 and Web 3 providers that can help setting up proper bug bounty and invite ethical hackers actually to cooperate with you and help. And here is the example of Avalanche, how they do bug bounty in Hack and Proof. So they have different scope and actually open to receive vulnerabilities. So just in case someone didn't know about bug bounty for Avalanche, go check it out. They have that for different products they build, and it's good and easy communication that you can get within the team. As far as we're working with Avalanche team for quite a while, we see this communication and expertise, and it's really important for technical guys when they can be heard and understand. Yeah, and the last one, the last layer of defense should be insurance, that if something happens, you know that it can be covered. And it's really important because for a lot of projects it's huge money losses, and it should be addressed and prepared before. Unfortunately, this industry is still on the developing stage, but there are traditional players that helping to ensure DeFi protocols, and users who are willing to do that because it's their money and they are at risk. And yeah, it's sharing the interesting statistics from one of our research by CR.life, which we've done for around 2,000 projects, that unfortunately only around 1.2% have all these policies in place, meaning several audits, bug bounty, insurance, no hack cases, and which is interesting that only around 30% of projects audit one part of code, then deploy to another one, and it means that the deployed code is not that one that's audited, which sounds like not okay. Why are you doing audit that, and why you're not using the proper code? Also, only 20% of this 1,500 actually use bug bounty programs, which means they have clear communication channel for hackers how to submit vulnerabilities to them. And which is also interesting that 20% of all these audits have critical vulnerabilities that haven't been fixed. That's a good question, why? You can go for more information on CR.life and check all the ratings for a lot of projects and crypto exchanges there, as well as check that on CoinGecko. Yeah, and some resources for developers to check the security best practices, and some playgrounds where you can test your knowledge for DeFi security and how to uncover vulnerabilities and how to write proper, secure smart contracts. Yep, that's all from my side. I'd be happy to address all the questions, if there is any. Okay, if no questions, I'd be happy to address them in private conversation. Thank you a lot. Have a great, productive day.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening. We have a DeFi panel at 3 o'clock, so in a few minutes, and then we'll have some more people coming up. Thanks.
Step one in emceeing, make sure you pick up the live mic and not the one that's run out of battery. Okay, welcome back guys. So now we are going beyond the bubble. Beyond the bubble right now. DeFi, we've been speaking about that a lot. It's been in the news. We're going to talk about some practical use cases for DeFi. So I think it'll be a great conversation. And to lead that conversation, I would like to introduce a great friend to Avalanche and to crypto in general, Laura Vidiella from Ledger Prime. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much, Devin. Can you all hear me well? All right, so yeah, the panel is called Beyond the Bubble, Practical Applications for DeFi. It's actually funny, a few days ago, I was on another panel and someone mentioned that DeFi was not a sexy product anymore, but I can assure you today we have very hot speakers up here, so I would like to welcome them all on stage. We have Arisa from Sega Finance. Big round of applause. We have Jay from Avalabs. We have Tasha from Alpha DAO, and Derek will be joining shortly. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. All right, we all ready? Yeah. All right, yeah, so I would like to start by giving our speakers a couple minutes to introduce themselves, what they do in DeFi, and what they're looking forward to.
Yeah, I can start. Hi, everyone. My name is Arisa, and I am the co-founder of a DeFi protocol called Sega. Sega is the first decentralized exotic derivatives protocol, and we are basically the first in the world to create smart contracts that can handle options that have exotic conditions. And recently, we launched on mainnet around a month and a half ago. We've reached 33 million in TVL. If you guys are interested in checking out our product, it's app.sega.fi. You're able to make safer yields in a volatile environment from around 12% to 200% APY.
Wow, that sounds great. 12 to 200 in this market. Hi, it's Tasha from Alpha Ventures DAO. We started in 2020, so I co-founded Alpha Finance Lab back then. So we started out as a DeFi lab, and we expanded to become a Web3 venture builder and incubator. So we've built a lot of DeFi products. One of them is called Alpha Homora. If you've used the product since 2020, it was a very big lending and leverage yield farming product, up to about $3-4 billion in TVL. And then we also built NFT infrastructure. It's launching next week. We incubated 7 other projects within the Web3 space. So some in DeFi, some in NFT infrastructure, some in gaming infrastructure. And then as a next phase, we're looking to launch, communal investing. So be on the lookout for that.
Hey everybody, my name is Jay from Avalabs. So we're the company, one of the companies that's building Avalanche, the blockchain. So thank you again for coming. What honestly excites me about DeFi was where, I think from my journey where it's all started, which is prior to Avalabs, so 2.5 years ago, was a part of a DEX called AirSwap. So AirSwap was really kind of my first foray into decentralized finance, and I think we all had our kind of first rabbit hole moment. That's really what got me into wow, this new paradigm is much more efficient than traditional finance rails. And I think there's something there. Of course, there's a lot of distractions that I think came along the way. That's just the nature of open systems. And so right now, I think we've gathered some incredible speakers just to talk about what's really practical, and excited to share some of our thoughts with you guys. So thanks for coming.
So to continue a little bit what Jay said, yeah, the first DeFi platform, I believe, was launched around 2015. So especially over the past 3 years, there's been an abundance of new projects. And question here now is, from all these decentralized projects, more or less, what are like the best use cases that you guys have seen build and that we should continue pouring resources in?
Yeah, I can start. I think since 2020 until today, a lot of projects are trying to come up with complicated products, which I think very good in terms of like continue to be innovative. But I think it comes down to what really sticks are still the basic ones, right? Trading platforms, lending platforms, those are like the fundamental layers of DeFi, or even in finance, right? And I think that will continue to be the trend, in which there are going to be variations of trading platforms, variation of lending platforms. So I think what we're going to see in the next move is going to be not so much on like a very big new trend in DeFi, but more so like different variations of lending, perhaps as isolated pools, perhaps under collateralized lending, protocol to protocol lending, or even trading. And I think that's pretty much how I see DeFi at this moment.
Arisa, from a Sega point of view, you guys are pretty much a deal generating platform, right? So what do you see the best, the next big thing, or what is the best use case that you see here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the #1 value of decentralized finance is smart contracts. And the value of smart contracts is basically digitalizing what was originally a paper trail in the traditional industry. And in traditional finance, there is a huge problem with operational cost and accessibility. On the operational cost side, because there are so much different rules for different types of financial products, every geography also has a very different way that you can distribute these products. And so naturally, for financial institutions, they would have different people in different countries doing very different operations to distribute products that are like similar but slightly different. And that is very, very costly. And also on the accessibility side, because it is so costly, it only becomes available to certain individuals with a relatively high net worth. It is also only available in certain countries that are more economically developed. And so the paper trail and the really annoying operations in the TradFi space actually creates a larger wealth divide among nations and among people. And the value of DeFi is that by making everything a smart contract, it is much faster, much cleaner. And by putting it on a blockchain and making it more accessible to anyone to invest from just 1 cent, that is really, I think, a practical application of DeFi.
Jay, how have you seen this evolution also pre-Avalanche with AirSwap and this kind of like emergence to where we are now?
Yeah, so I think what we've probably pushed through is some of the experimental phase, and I think we're very much still in that phase. I know our space tends to talk about adoption a lot and maybe the road to mainstream. I personally think we're still very far from that, and that's okay. I think we just have to be very, very honest with ourselves to see where the product lies, and DeFi specifically. And I remember from the experience at AirSwap, what I learned a lot was really focusing on the metrics. I know that sounds really obvious once it's said out loud, but I think sometimes we get a little bit lost in some of the hype, the high yields, all the things. I know we kind of talk in the background about some of the distractions in our space. And so from the DApp experience, it was really about usability and also true value, not just the unsustainable value. And then moving on to the Avalanche experience, been part of the company for now 2.5 years. It's a little bit of a different focus area. We're more of the infrastructure layer. We're the layer 1 protocol that's basically facilitating the DeFi ecosystem. So now it's more about performance metrics on the back end side. How fast can these dApps perform? How cheap can the transactions be? And then, of course, ultimately contributing to better UX as well. And so I think when it comes to where we're at in Avalanche, we're hoping that the user experience from the developer side is as seamless as possible, and we're still getting there. We're not perfect, and I don't think anyone's perfect in this space. And so making it easier to build, easier to deploy, and also having the resources to support each other. If you can make mistakes, someone can say, hey, you made this mistake, but we can help lift you up. And I think that's what Web3 should be ultimately about, and I think we're getting there, and we're continuing to improve on that. I think also on the user side, when a user comes into Avalanche, we're a little bit of a complex structure. We have multiple chains, especially with subnets. And so the joke I always say is when people learn about blockchain, you have to go through all the hurdles that we all, I think, respectively have gone through. And when you come to Avalanche, you basically have to go through the journey of Bitcoin, then smart contracts-enabled platforms. And then all of a sudden you come to Avalanche and you go, well, I learned about blockchain, but now there's potentially infinite amount of chains. And so I think that's where we need to really abstract it a little bit and take away those complexities. And kind of the other analogy I used to like to give often is think about Web 2. When you talk about Web 2 technologies, it's not like you have Netflix powered by AWS, or you don't have people talking about oh, TCP/IP or POP3, IMAP, email protocols, they're going to change the world. No one ever talks about that. Sure, maybe the developers might. And so I think it's also a little bit about how we tell this story. And I think if we can tell the story better, then hopefully we can kind of close the gaps from a little bit of the noise and get more of the signal to come through. And that's kind of what we're looking at Avalanche.
Yeah, like speaking of noise, I do want to add, I think metrics and being able to track them in a transparent way is such an important part of DeFi. I think the last cycle showed a lot of just inflationary structures within the DeFi space. It also, I think, showed a lot of marketing that probably wasn't user friendly. When people say that your yields are this number of APY, they're not taking fees into account. They're not taking the underlying volatility of the assets into account. So I think realized yields will be one of the larger topics in the next DeFi protocol or the next DeFi cycle. And for instance, at Sega, we focus on doing USDC staking with USDC yields only. And so we're very against staking underlying assets that could depreciate in value without you being able to access it. And I think those types of mentality will become more of a norm in the next cycle.
Yeah, you guys have touched really good points here. Also how many of the dApps that we have right now in DeFi, they were based in highly leveraged inflationary tokens, right? So all these metrics, all these APYs, they're pretty much, we've seen what's happened recently. So on this note, how do you think the future of this yield farming protocols as well as even staking tokens would define DeFi?
Yeah, I can start. I think it's a way to growth hack things, right? With liquidity mining, with token stakings, and with the next phase of DeFi, I think it's just going to be one way to growth hack. But there are going to be new ways to growth hack that will come up that may not only depend on short-term incentives. So there can be more new ways of incentivizing things that are not only yields. For example, let's say proof of contribution. So now that there are more on-chain data, more community in the space, if let's say you contribute, you don't have to expect yields, but you have on-chain identity, and then with that on-chain identity, perhaps it leads you to midterm incentives, for example, getting access to private information or deal flows or something like that. So I think that's going to be more of a next wave of growth hacking, or even proof of becoming a DAO in the future, or to become a DAO member, right? So I think liquidity mining or yield farming is only going to be one way of growth hacking. But more of a short-term way. But I think looking back in the past, I feel like we still have to go through that phase to onboard the mass users, right? Because without the yields, I was talking to Jay earlier because back 2 years ago, getting into DeFi on-ramping sucks. UX also sucks. So there has to be a lot of incentives for people to really get into DeFi back then. And short-term incentives with yields, were that, right? But now that we have attention, now that we have majority of people who can enter the space entered, then now it's more about how do we incentivize the midterm activities instead of the short term. Yeah.
Wow, I have strong feelings about this. So I wish Derek made it to this panel because we actually had a very fruitful debate about this a few nights ago. I think in terms of what I'm excited about, liquidity mining and kind of the future of very DeFi native business models is, I think as Tasha mentioned in her intro, there's going to be a whole new set of asset classes that will come in the next cycle of DeFi. There's already a lot of projects in development that is using, say, things like exotic derivatives, things like credit default swaps, waterfalls, lots of different types of assets are currently being developed. And I think there's a lot of projects that are also looking at doing liquidity mining of those new asset classes. An example project is something I'm really interested in called Panoptics, which basically creates a Uniswap v3 for options. And I think those types of protocols are something that I think will be the future of DeFi. on kind of the growth hacks that you were mentioning, Tasha, and kind of that inflationary business models, I think that is going to be actually on the demise. So I'm actually quite anti-V tokenomics, and I'm pretty public about this. I think the fact that you have to stake governance tokens and also an asset that is fairly volatile, I don't think that like theoretically makes sense from just like an economic perspective. And also when companies IPO in like the Web 2 or like, Web 1 fields, you're not all of a sudden asking the people who own the equity to like not be able to sell it. Like when you IPO, that is when you're supposed to be able to sell it. And I think that like user unfriendliness is probably going to eat at the core of how protocols are governed and how people are motivated, and it creates a very short-term mindset. And so for a long-term growth of a protocol and for a long-term growth of the ecosystem, I think there should be a different best practice for growth hacks, although I don't have an answer myself.
Yeah, and maybe to build off of that too, I think to your point about the locking mechanism and things like that, I think we as a collective industry got a little bit carried away with some of the folding and usage of liquidity multiple times and all these high yields. I think that's helped with growth hacking with users, but it's also, again, short-sighted. So I think the other take that I tend to kind of push through is we have to be more realistic about these expectations. When you talk about, let's say, like if you were to compare, I don't know, DeFi to cars, when you have a Toyota Camry, you're not telling everybody that this Toyota Camry is the fastest in the world. I feel like that's kind of where we got to in DeFi a little bit, and also just broadly in Web3. But I think when you talk about Toyota Camry and you say, this is the most reliable car, it will never break. That is still equally as valuable as saying this is the fastest car to certain people. I think that's the same type of value proposition, but a little bit more realistic. So kind of bringing it back home to DeFi, usually when I talk to people that may not be in this room, maybe more like your friends that are not as evangelized by the crypto world or even the Web3 technologies, I say, hey, by the way, there is a way to stake your dollars, or like USDC or whatever stablecoin, but your dollars, and you can actually earn 1% to 2% yield on it. And I'm from New York, so in the United States, if you have a cash account, you earn like 0.5% on your dollars. Now I know that it's not an apples to apples comparison because the cash account usually has FDIC insurance. It also, well, I guess it's liquid, so kind of similar in that sense. And it's also just actual dollar and not a stable coin that represents a dollar. But effectively, if you want to hedge your crypto portfolio, it almost does a very similar thing. And as we continue on in the kind of progression of this industry, insurance will likely come through, and hopefully that'll kind of have coverage of those assets. I think we'll also find out which stablecoins are truly stable and which ones are not. And I think we're continuing to find that, and so I think there's reputation there. And so hopefully as we continue along the way, then these products become much more useful. And like what you said, Arissa, about one of the biggest innovations in DeFi being smart contracts, I totally agree with that, and I think the other angle to that is it also enables users, all of us, independently to get the most value out of the system. And so ultimately, and I think we all kind of get bearish and bullish in our own minds trying to really understand, hey, is this an industry that will survive? And I'm definitely in there as well. But ultimately, I think if we think about this technology as making the system more efficient, well, I think it's inevitably going to get there. I think the hurdles are a little bit of the noise, or a lot of the noise probably, UX issues, and there's probably a lot of things in between, and so hopefully our industry can kind of come together. We're going to still have bull runs that are going to be massively distracting. That's just going to be how these open systems work. But with more people in the system, it'll be much less volatile in theory, and hopefully we can kind of shake things out, and eventually this asset class becomes much more legitimized than it is now, and I think that's where we're trending towards today.
Thank you, guys. We've been covering really different topics within DeFi, and there's a lot of different things for the audience to learn here. So for someone that's getting started, whether they have financial background or not, how would you recommend them to get started? Like what resources are out there that they can use, or what's the best way for them to get started and dip their toes into DeFi?
Sure, I can take that. So unfortunately, this isn't the Ethereum space, but there's a great protocol called Rabbit Hole. Rabbit Hole basically gives you crypto rewards for trying out different types of DeFi applications. And I think that is a really great protocol to get your feet wet, understand what the types of applications are there. I also think now there's a lot of YouTube channels that kind of dips your toes into crypto, kind of teaches you what a swap is, how to buy your first tokens, how to use a DEX, how to stake. I think there's a lot of available resources just by Googling. But also, I think one of the fascinating things about the Web3 space and also in the DeFi space is that a lot of people on Twitter, founders of protocols, influencers, degens who are really, really knowledgeable in the space, a lot of their DMs are open. And so I also just urge everyone who's getting started to reach out to these people directly, and maybe, who knows, there might be a job opportunity or some really cool conversations that you could be having with these people.
Yeah, for me, I like to break things down into 3 phases, especially for getting started from ground zero, right? One is be sure to educate yourself on the on-ramping part. I think on-ramping is still pretty confusing, especially to DeFi or to on-chain. You have to understand how MetaMask works. You have to know there are fake MetaMasks. You have to understand how there can be fake websites that will lure you to leak private keys and all that. So really make sure you understand on-ramping and how there are ways to scam the on-ramping part. And for sure, you can do that through a lot of Googling, YouTubing, but focus on on-ramping, because I think a lot of the people get turned off by that on-ramping because they got scammed along the way, so they don't even make it to DeFi yet. So I think that's the first phase, right? The second phase is token swapping or even token transfer, because usually retails or in general, you would come to DeFi from centralized exchange. So in order for you to transfer the tokens from centralized exchange, you have to understand there are different chains. Like you were saying that, hey, it's not only Ethereum, it's not only Bitcoin. There are more chains as well. You have to understand how the token transfer works a little bit, such that you don't transfer to the wrong network. Because a lot of people, even though they make it to on-ramping, they would perhaps transfer to wrong places, and then the tokens would be gone anyways. And then they're like, okay, I'm done with this, right? So in the end, they haven't got to DeFi. And then once you get to that phase, the final phase is more about, okay, there are a lot of things on DeFi now. Now that I make it to the DeFi land, let's actually understand what are the different protocols, let's say Uniswap, Compound, how do they work? And you can try dabbling in a little bit. And I think you'll start from the basic ones, and then from there you get down the rabbit hole, and you'll see a lot of opportunities that you can explore.
So I think you took my second one, which is what I would say, swapping, but I can add other things. So Rabbit Hole is actually integrated with Avalanche. So
Amazing.
That's the other thing. But I think you guys covered it basically, but I think the higher level thing is really simply to try the dApps. I've always said that from day one. I remember when I first downloaded MetaMask, it was scary, confusing, a lot of different emotions. MetaMask is an amazing on-ramp these days, or has gotten much better, maybe not amazing. But what I think has done really well is got people to try dApps, I think, along the way. And so I think the challenge really is understand that there are smart contract platforms. I think a lot of people in this crowd probably know that, but most people don't. People think about crypto and they think about Dogecoin, they think about payments coins, they think about just holding and trading, mostly like traditional finance. And then when you tell people, you said, hey, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, all these tokens actually can be used for something. And they're like, oh, wait, really? Not just trading? And that's when I think people start having their interest peaked. And I think the biggest gap is really, again, just to connect to a dApp. So kind of the simple recommendation, fund your wallet and just connect, and hopefully don't fund too much, because this is, again, we're trying things out. We're not really trying to go too hard into DeFi, because that could also kind of raise a little bit of risk there for yourself. But really connect, play around with it. You're going to have questions. You're going to start connecting and you're going to say, okay, what's a liquidity pool? Why do these things exist? And start doing your research to go backwards, and I think that's the journey that a lot of us have taken, and I think it's a journey of kind of perpetual learning, I would say, and so you're going to continue down the rabbit hole, and you might find yourself that, hey, DeFi is not for you. Maybe there's something interesting in NFT collecting. Maybe there's something interesting in gaming. And so I think it's just really just understanding where the Web3 has a place for you and where you have a place in it, I think, and that's really the soul searching that you probably have to do.
Absolutely agree on the Twitter side as well. Make sure to reach out. I think the crypto community can speak for itself. We're very welcoming, so that's definitely a way. And actually, quickly touching on something you mentioned, Tasha, how do we, there's a lot of scams out there, right? And then in the learning process, I think that's one of the scariest parts that you guys were mentioning of like, how do we kind of break through this? How can a new user verify that they're actually not getting scammed or they are clicking on something safe that would not completely drain their funds?
Yeah, very good question. I think the MVP way that users can do themselves is several things, right? One is that usually if you have any conversations, it's always on the main group. So if anyone direct message you, you can assume it's a scam. Or if you want to, double check. And I think the final thing is that if let's say, especially on MetaMask, which I think there have been a lot of cases like fake MetaMask. So with all the hot wallets, they will never ask you to, input private keys or anything beyond more than your typical MetaMask, password. So if there's anything that beyond just the normal password, then that's, the red flag. But your question actually leads me to another thing that I think we all need in the industry, which is more of like a go-to place of information, right? So I think that's where like the central entity would come in, or like regulations, not even regulations in a way to like securitize things, but like regulations in such a way that it's easy to on-ramp users, and they know that, hey, if you go and check, if they go and check out information on this source, it's verified. I don't think the reason that we all have to do the MVP way ourselves is because there's no verified sources. There are so many sources everywhere, from Twitter, from Google, and many other links, and that just make it so hard to on-ramp. So I think if we're going to be successfully, on-ramping to the mass, we really need to have like a certified, centralized association or something of information that people can like take off from there.
I also think a way to not get hacked is if you are a degen and you're trying out new DeFi protocols, like go to their social media, go to their Discord, like ask around and see like who they got their security audits from. I think like just knowing kind of the right now, like it is a bit of a you have to do your research culture, but you can really go onto these like social media or like blogs that have an abundance of information, and I think that's another way you can really figure out like what kind of scams are going on around this protocol, like what kind of safety measures have they taken, and all of that information will be very valuable to de-risk yourself.
Thank you. All right, to wrap up, just 30 seconds each, what is the most exciting innovation that you're currently seeing in DeFi or you want to see? No bias?
Sure, I can start. I don't think there's going to be, big innovation within the sector itself. I think the next thing I'm very interested in is more of like an intersection between social identity, DeFi, and NFT. So I think that's like more of like a combination of those, because within DeFi itself, right? I think without other ways of growth hacking, then it's more of like innovative on the product side, which if it's innovative on the product side, it's a bit hard to garner users at this moment, especially in the bear market. So I think now that we have on-chain users that have been sticking around since 2020 or even before, there's a lot of data already, right, that we can form identity or even like understand how they use the products. So I think those are going to be the fundamental information that we, within DeFi products, can even build on top of. Perhaps you have, under collateralized lending. Perhaps you have different kind of ways that you can think about, a way to tap into and make use of this data, right? And the reason that I say it's also linked with NFTs is because NFT was pretty much the moment that onboard mass users that did not get hooked by yields, right? So we have different kind of data sets, and I think if there's a way that there can be, a linkage between this mass users and also the financial products that we have built as a fundamental layer through identity, then that's going to be like a way to link the whole ecosystem better. Because if you were to ask NFT holders or NFT enthusiasts, they may not want to use DeFi, right? And there's a different reason for them entering the Web3 space. But I think if there's a linkage between the two segments, using social identity or on-chain identity, then it's more of like a natural way to link all that. So that's what I'm most interested in terms of the next trend, not particularly within DeFi itself, but like the linkage of those.
I think for me, it's not actually DeFi itself, but maybe the infrastructure and the wallets and things like that. And I'll keep it short, but the main reason why that excites me is I think everyone's really, or maybe not everyone, but there's certain people that are thinking about amazing things. And I'm not going to be biased by picking Avalanche projects, but some things that stand out to me, Argent wallet. Those guys are thinking of ways to thwart the accidents that we were basically trying to teach people how to avoid. If it's embedded in the product itself, you no longer have to do the due diligence that you have to do. It doesn't make sense in the long run for users to have to do all that due diligence. I don't think any of us do that in any other industry as much as we do in crypto. And then the other product I think that I have to give a shout out to is Zerion. Those guys have been building amazing wallets. They started really focused and built a product that really worked and people loved, and then built upon that. They didn't take on too much, and I think they really grew at a healthy rate, and now you're seeing some of the success pay off. So kind of long story short, really like slow and steady wins the race. I truly believe in this space, and it also minimizes mistakes, I think. So that's where the infra is really what stands out to me the most.
Cool. And not to be biased, I think Sega's pretty cool. But outside of that, I think my vision for DeFi is that the markets are still very nascent, and in the next cycle, it's really, really going to expand. I think it's going to expand in both ways, kind of on the public side and on the private side. So public side is on the trading end, for protocols that have already launched tokens, how do we utilize that token? Like, how do we have people stake more? How do we have people govern more? I think those best practices will come out, and it's going to create a very interesting incentive for new joiners to come into the ecosystem. And that expansion is something I'm really, really excited about, because it won't just be like the innovators and the early adopters, it will be the early majority. The second part is regarding the private sector, and so these are all the protocols that are currently working on a project that has not launched tokens yet. I think there's going to be an abundance of these protocols and small projects that are currently working in like very small groups, but I think in the next cycle, there's going to be a lot more partnerships and a lot of integration, and in DeFi terms, you call that composability. I think that is going to be a very striking factor that's going to create a lot of just amplification of services. I think, I'm not sure if it's going to be like a merger or an acquisition type of deal, but for certain DEXs and certain DeFi like derivative staking protocols to combine, I think that could create like so much more opportunities for different types of users. And yeah, I think that type of partnerships is something I'm really excited about on the private side.
I feel like there's a lot more to say here, so we should continue this over at Twitter Spaces at some point. But that said, before we're a little late at this point, I think, but thank you very much, Arisa, Tasha, and Jay, for your wonderful DeFi knowledge and enriching us with it. And yeah, big round of applause for the team.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think Jay will introduce the next panel now.
Hello. Yep, so up next we have a gaming panel. I believe Mark Shim is the moderator, so kind of stay tuned. Same format will be on very shortly. Thanks.
Two of the panelists are missing, so we gotta take these seats. Two of the panelists are missing right now, so we gotta
So we're not.
Yeah. But Victoria's coming in like 5 minutes. Okay. So I think we're not waiting. We'll get started and then I guess she can just like jump. Yeah. Let me just start off with a couple of questions. Yeah, C-square. Let's like treat this like a fireside panel for now, and just like whatever you want to chat about, let's go that direction. Hey everyone, welcome to the Gaming X NFTs panel. I'm Anthony from Rock Capital, a multi-strategy fund that focuses on both primary and secondary. Two of the panelists are running a bit late, so we'll start off with some introductions. Did anyone hear anything that I said?
I think not.
No, I fucked up? All right, cool.
Do it again.
Ciara?
Hi everyone, I'm Ciara. I'm the founder of C-Square Ventures. We are a chain-agnostic venture capital, and we're investing 150 million into the Web3 world. And I used to be the head of listings, investments, and incubation at Huobi. Very glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm GD from Unopened, and we are a company builder, 100% subsidiary of Korea, and we are one of the largest Web3 native company builder in Korea. Currently, we have like around 180 people building seven to 8 different products using NFTs and tokens. Yep.
Cool. So Ciara, I would like to start with you for a second. In terms of trends that you're seeing in the gaming space in crypto, how are you evaluating and thinking about Web2 teams who are looking to pivot into crypto and Web3 native founders who are building games?
So two trends that we're seeing in the gaming space overall is first that cloud gaming are getting more utilized in the Web3 gaming world, which, like in the past, we used to spend thousands of dollars to just buying the full equipment so we can unlock the full experiences for the games. As of now, with cloud gaming, you don't have to, and a lot of the bigger companies are investing heavily into this. And the second trend is that I see more women getting involved and diversification percentage getting increased in the gaming industry. As you know, with mobile game getting unlocked, a lot of women now are getting more involved in the gaming industry. In the States, there are like 65% of women who plays mobile games, and with games like Cross Animals and more like user-generating games that are getting more popular in the women group, that I think that it will be great to even attract more women developers in the gaming industry and getting more involved into Web3, and that's what I have been personally working on in the past few years. And as for comparisons of Web2 teams and Web3 teams, I think apparently Web2 teams, there are more experiences of setting the backstory of the games and modeling. Also, just with developers, they usually have hundreds of developers with experiences from the 70s for developing games. As well, Web3, we have been only been around for gaming for like about 3 to 4 years, right? So we're less experienced that way. But I think Web3 teams, they are more experienced with designing the tokenomics, while in Web2, their kind of business model is to direct sell the games, or like microtransactions, or like in-game purchases. While in Web3, we found a way to incentivize not only the players, developers, but also guilds, engines, everybody who contribute to the ecosystem with the token model. So I think that's very interesting. And with crypto VCs like us, I think that we should be focusing on helping those young Web3 game teams with designing a better model with the token, help them with building a better community and track more users.
Cool. GD, I'd be curious to hear your approach from a builder's perspective. And you mentioned that you're incubating 7 teams, have 180 plus team members. How are you approaching building gaming in the crypto space?
So basically, we have seen a lot of like gaming projects coming up with just concept arts and some model. But our team is mostly focusing on actual real games that is actually fun, which you could enjoy. So, and we truly think that even for the crypto games, even there's like a earn factor, in order to like survive and in order to develop a long-lasting game, I mean there should be a fundamental factor for games, which is usually fun. So that's why we've been building we've been working with the people who who are actually highly experienced from the Web2 gaming companies and who has like huge experience developing games. So that's what we are trying to do, bringing traditional Web2, like proven people to this Web3 space, and then helping them to build a token economy, and then like everything, just I guess like Ciara mentioned, some crypto components to put.
What have been some of the challenges in transitioning developers or teammates over from Web 2 into Web 3?
So from our perspective, we had some hard time explaining the concept of crypto community, because usually traditional gaming companies, they develop a complete version of game for, let's say, like for 2 to 3 years, and then they launch it. But like as we all know, the crypto games, like all the communities actually participating during the development process, right? So those kind of concepts were a bit hard to accept, accepted by the traditional game developers. And then another point that I want to mention is the token economy. So most of game developers have been handling in-game economy, but the in-game economy was not connected to external economy, right? It's like in crypto games, the game developers have to deal with the volatility, and then like all the token prices going up and down in 24/7.
Great. We have one of our panelists who just arrived. Victoria, do you want to take us? Oh. Yep. Victoria, do you mind giving a brief introduction on yourself?
Yeah, first of all, apologies. I got lost in the Korean taxi. I work in product at Fractal. We're a Web3 gaming marketplace and gaming infrastructure provider. And yeah, happy to tell everyone a little bit more about Fractal, but I think we're short on time, so excited to be here.
Cool. Ciara, this next question is for you. How do you approach Web3 gaming from an investment perspective? What are some of the frameworks that you use at C2? Some of the challenges? Yeah.
So investment perspective in Web3 gaming overall, so we have been really hesitating about investing in direct games, single games, because it's really hard to see them really make it, right? So it happens in the traditional gaming industry as well. It's very challenging, and we have to be patient about this. We have to accept lower successful rates compared to maybe some of the other sectors that we are investing in. So even for traditional gaming, the total market cap is still very good, right? For US market itself is valued at 85 billion, so there's definitely great opportunities there, but only 4% of the games out of hundreds that got released and published every year, they actually make a profit, and about 80% of them just get forgotten and net a loss. So I think we have to be extremely patient, and also as a VC, our approach is to add as much value as we can with all the expertise that we gained from running exchanges listing and working with token models and help them with their launch strategy, especially during bear market can be really tricky for projects to decide how to launch a token, whether you should do a public sale or IEO, ICO, direct listing, what exchanges you should work with, what platform you should work with, and also what kind of money you're looking for, and what kind of regions you want to be working with. So that's kind of our expertise, so we can help them and really empower them with our experiences from the past few years. And I also think that investment framework in the gaming industry itself should be more looking at the whole ecosystem instead of just direct games. So we are also investing in studios, engines, toolings, marketplace, and also gaming, kind of borrowing, lending for NFTs, and different infrastructure kind of deals.
Cool. Victoria, this is a question that I posed earlier, but from a builder's perspective, would be super curious what you're seeing at Fractal between Web 2 teams entering crypto and Web 3 native teams, and how you approach that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say that before the market correction, we saw that there was a lot of hype in the market. What that means is that there's a lot of Web3 native teams that don't necessarily have game development experience trying to build in Web3 gaming. And now I personally do believe that having someone on your team who understands game economics and design is hugely important. So what we've seen since the market correction is that the hype in the market has died down, so people who haven't built games before kind of left the market, right, or have abandoned their projects. But there's still a lot of strong Web 2 native teams who have years of experience building Web 2 games, who are continuing to build, right? And case in point, being at Career Blockchain Week, there are so many experienced Web 2 game developers that are building in this space. And these are really the teams that we're looking to work with at Fractal, because we believe that ultimately, they are the team who can deliver a game over the long term. And crypto experience is something that you can always hire for. So yeah, I think when we think about partnering with games, we want to always diligence and make sure that they are really true game builders.
Great. I guess this is an open question. What are the current challenges that you're seeing in terms of building Web3 games? And how do you anticipate that changing over the next few years? GD?
So, yeah, I'll start. So basically, we think that there should be there are 2 points that we need to solve. And number 1 is mass adoption, and number 2 is better user experience. And so let me explain the first one, mass adoption. Of course, the crypto gaming market is huge, but and then there's a number of crypto game users. But still, comparing to traditional Web 2 games, the user base is still small. And in order to survive, and in order to grow, it's really necessary to bring Web 2 gamers into Web 3 space. So that's why we think the crypto game should be fun and to be more attractive for Web 2 users. And the second thing, the user experience, of course, all the on-ramp tools, and then like any kind of one-stop solution. I see a lot of projects are building on at this point. So I think it's gonna be solved within a year or so. But still, I mean, like a lot of some chains. If you go on chains, users have to pay they'll have to own 2 tokens, like the game token, and then like token for the chain itself. So those kind of user experience friction should be solved as soon as possible.
I 100% concur. I think in the future, right, when a gamer is playing with a Web3 game, they shouldn't know or even have to know what chain it's built on. It should really feel like a really native Web2 gaming experience. So what does that mean specifically, right? From an onboarding standpoint, creating a wallet right now is, a very painful process, and it's not really friendly for Web2 builders. So at Fractal, we're really focused on essentially building products and onboarding experiences that mimic the experience that you have in Web 2. And similarly, from, even fiat on-ramp, right? It's such a simple problem. If I want to buy an NFT, right now it's such a difficult problem where you have to buy on centralized exchange and transfer over. So I think it's important to start to incorporate all these startups as well as new tools that make onboarding to crypto a lot more friendly and incorporate it into the game so that the whole gameplay experience should just feel as simple as it feels today, right? When we're playing games. So yeah.
I totally agree with what these guys have said. And I also think that the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is how to change from the play to earn model to the play and earn model. You just have to be able to really enjoy the game, right? The average gamers, they spend like an hour per day playing their favorite game. And currently Web3 games, they don't offer the same kind of qualities. So I think what should be changed in the next few years is when we really see AAA level games get deployed into Web3. And I think we're already seeing the trends right now as we see Xinga people, Epic Game Store also come to us, right, in Korean market. They're all bridging into Web3 world. And I think that's how you really get mass adoption from traditional gaming industry for mass adoption for users.
I think the last thing I would add is that so far what we've talked about is challenges for Web3 gamers or for people to onboard onto Web3 games. From a developer standpoint, I think there's really two pain points as well. Is one, for teams that understand how to build games, they need a blockchain partner to help them either incorporate the Web3 elements into their game and as well as navigate through blockchain development. And that's something that is, you can hire for, but the talent is really difficult to come by, right? And the second thing is really game tokenomics. Sierra earlier talked about moving away from a play to earn model to play and earn, but right now I think there still hasn't, the tokenomics for a lot of these games haven't been battle tested, right? Or not, volatility proof. So I think that's one of the things that game developers really have to learn how to, test right and design well so that, if there's a market downturn, people don't leave a game and cause a collapse in the game economy.
Cool. So I think over the last cycle, a lot of the NFT market was driven by PFP collections, by some games that launched their NFTs long before they ever plan on releasing a game, like Star Atlas on Solana. And let's say I'm a gaming developer or a gaming team. I'm looking to bring a project to market. Could you walk me through some of the steps in terms of how you would recommend thinking about launching NFTs, launching a token, perhaps going through a launch pad? And let's say my game is out a year from now. Would be curious how you might think through things that on a step-by-step basis or how you would advise them.
I can start maybe on the Launchpad side. So one of Fractal started as an NFT marketplace on Launchpad for games. So we spent a lot of time helping them think through how to launch their NFTs at the right time. And so I think for us, what we have seen is that you really have to build an organic community first. And it's not about a rush of getting 10,000 Discord users. It's about curating a community with true fans, even if the fan base is smaller. And until you get to that point, it's kind of pointless to launch an NFT project, especially in this current game environment, because the degens are not there to mint. It's going to be the true gamers and true fans that will mint. So building an organic community first is hugely important. And then the second thing is being able to think through the roadmap and the value you can deliver to these gamers. I think because the market correction, people are more hesitant to launch or buy into projects with a longer development timeline. So you really have to make sure you're breadcrumbing different deliverables or benefits you can provide to these communities along the way before the game is launched to keep them engaged. And I think the last thing is when you actually do think about how to design the mint, et cetera, you have to think through a lot about allowancing strategies and getting people engaged and opt to your project. And honestly, the best way we've seen so far is by doing a lot of cross-community collaboration with other gaming projects to cross-pollinate the interest from different genres and different communities. So I would say that, if you're thinking about minting NFTs, it's definitely a community-first approach. And everything should be focused around how to drive and build a really strong community that's not just in it to, flip money.
I totally agree that the first thing we should do is build an organic community. But in a builder's perspective, in reality, it's really hard to build an organic community in this bear market and even without a product itself. So it's really hard. So let's say you launch you open a Discord channel 2 years before your game launch, and then you have to maintain the community, the hype of the community for 2 years. It's really hard. When you look into the traditional gaming in the industry, you'll see a lot of gaming companies focusing 2 to 3 months before their game launch. So I see some crypto gaming projects following those tracks these days, selling NFTs or opening their communities around 3 to 4 months before their game launch. So I think those kind of trends will happen, and the community will participate more on those period, in short period, and we'll see how it goes.
We also see projects launch NFTs and never plan on launching a game, like the project I mentioned before.
So I think the timeline to really planning it out is extremely important. Not just that some of the games, like you said, they never launch the game, but also how you price it, the price base for the NFTs. If they're in Ethereum, it's still it fluctuates a lot, right? Compared to if they launched a year ago, if there's 2 Ethereum, and then as of now, the price for Ethereum decreased so much. And even we see some of the NFTs are priced with their own native token, and it's down 90%. So your community still get very hurt. So I totally agree that the timeline for launching your NFT should be aligned with when you can launch your game and have the real utility of those NFTs. Otherwise, it's just going to be similar to all of the PFP NFT models, right? Where a lot of the trading volume and market caps only captured by the top 3 or 4 projects out there. And it reminds me of the early stage of when you can only trade Litecoin, Bitcoin, and then Ethereum came along, and then US, and then you see a lot of the early stage tokens, they're gone because the technology, fundamental technology didn't really get executed. There's no ecosystem, nothing is really can be used, right? So that's my point on this.
Cool. So Korea is historically a very strong gaming market. And we're seeing many of the large Web 2 gaming studios starting to pivot into crypto locally. Would be curious from a builder's perspective, what do you think some of the advantages on building on subnets on Avalanche for gaming founders versus building on other chains?
I'll start. So having an independent network is really important for the stability. So as we have seen, seen through the several cases, the gas fee going up because of BAYC or any other projects which are really famous. We don't want users to be influenced by other external factors. So we want the stable service. Gaming is totally different in terms of the scale, user scale, and then it's totally 24/7 live service, real-time service. So stability is really important. And in terms of that, Avalanche Subnet I think it's a great advantage for the developers.
Great.
So the Avalanche subnet is really, they can empower different Web3 games, even NFT marketplace to have their own solution, right? And because it's all taking different block space, so it doesn't really give you a fee spike on the main Avalanche mainnet. And we've had our portfolio companies are already trying to bridge onto Avalanche subnets, and it works pretty well. So I think it's a good solution for some of the teams not to necessarily have to build their own public chain. That's lots of work, maintenance, and to develop your own ecosystem, all of that resources come along with it. And using the subnet also enable you to still use your own native token as a gas fee.
I guess kind of extending on that, what would you advise projects and founders looking to build their own chain to launch a game?
I've met a number of gaming companies, and they were actually really interested in building their own. I think it was like 3 to 4 months ago during the bull market. But now I see a lot of gaming, especially for Web2 gaming companies, like doing partnerships with major chains at this point. So I think even from the first step, I actually told them not to build their own. I think it will be smart to utilize the community of existing chains. But I guess they have now realized it.
I guess to just follow up on that, I would just say that building a chain, it's a very different set of expertise and talent that you would need to have. And there's a lot of great talent already building layer 1s or layer 2s, right? So I would really recommend studios to look into all the options out there and perhaps even spend some of the resources and like money they have on just game development and just let that be your core competency. Because at the end of the day, it's always a matter of trade-offs of, what are you going to get incrementally by having your customized chain versus what you can get by putting all that dollars into actual game development.
Let me just say one thing. So I think the ones who actually want to build their own chain, it's mainly because they think blockchain is technology. But when we look into blockchain, I mean, everyone knows blockchain is not just the technology. It's philosophy, and it's building an ecosystem, and it's community. So building community and then building its own ecosystem for the chain, it's totally different business, and it needs totally different capability.
Ciara?
If you ask about have to build a chain in order to launch a game, I think that's very stupid. But for some of the projects like Gala Games has been my portfolio, they're also launching their own chain. I think that makes a lot of sense for them because they actually have 23 AAA level games lined up. It's gonna be working with them for distribution. So there's already an ecosystem for them, and they can better serve their games and also accumulate all communities and users onto the Gala ecosystem with their own native chain. But if you're only launching a single game and you have to build your own chain for that, I don't think that's the way to go.
Great. Let's say I'm a Web2 gaming founder and I'm skeptical of crypto. How do you convince me that kind of containing everything within my own closed loop ecosystem where all the value accrues to myself, what are the advantages and why should I build in Web3? Or why should I port my best IP over to Web3?
So bringing builders and community into the gaming itself, it's huge. It's already proven in Web2 area also. So everyone knows Steam. When we go into Steam, there's a lot of different like attachments and DLCs or other parts that we can add on to the games. And they have already experienced this, the advantage of bringing developers or community into the gaming space. So I think. Yeah, I think they just have to open their ecosystem.
I know we're running out of time, so just one quick add-on is that just think about Apple's ecosystem, right, where they invited a lot of developers to come develop on their infra. I mean, Web3 gaming is also very similar. From a closed economy, you're making it open, which means there's people can onboard and come into your ecosystem and leave much more easily. And in addition, you can create interoperability with other games. For example, NFT assets you can port over from game to game. So even though in the immediate term it feels like, oh, well, people can leave more easily, but on the plus side is if your game is good, it actually brings a lot more additional liquidity to your game, and it makes the barrier to buy into your game much more easily. So I think it's just giving the power back to its gamers in a positive way that benefits them over long term.
Okay, I am so sorry to interrupt you guys.
I think there's a pit lane walk.
Yeah, we've got something really exciting. I'm so sorry to interrupt. And for those that are not leaving, we can stay and talk about this until we're all tired. But if there's any Formula E fans in the house, by show of hands, no? Anyone? One? There's one Formula E fan. Right? Do you guys know where you are right now? We have a pit walk. You'll notice ladies walking around with lollipops. They're called lollipops. It says pit lane walk. If anybody has any interest in going down and taking a walk through the pit lane and seeing all the garages and the cars and who knows what's going on there right now, but it's kind of a fun thing to do. if you've never done it. If you're interested in doing that, you have to go now. It's got to be done by 4:30. Follow the ladies with the lollipops. They'll be walking out through the VIP. Feel free to leave your things here if you trust your peers, or take it with you if you don't. It's up to you. But we can't guarantee anything will be here when you get back. So enjoy.
Let's all go.
And if you guys would like to continue, you're welcome to. Unless you want to go in the pit lane.
I want to go to the pit lane.
All right, well, let's get going.
Why you got to leave me here?
Thanks. Sorry for the bad ending, guys,
Thanks,
but thank
everyone.
you so much. We appreciate you. Please give them a round of applause, guys.